the forgotten summit. The clouds move like ghosts across the spine of the Andes. High above the sacred valley, where the air grows thin and the silence feels almost ancient, the first light of dawn reveals a citadel carved into the bones of the mountain. The world knows its name, Machu Picchu, but the world may not truly know its story. For more than a century, the official tale has been clear. Machu Picchu was the lost royal estate of the Inca Emperor Pachacuti, a breathtaking architectural achievement of the 15th century, a city in the sky, untouched by the conquistadors. But what if that story, the one printed in textbooks, echoed by tour guides and repeated by scholars, is only a fragment of a much older truth? Because the stones themselves seem to whisper a different story. Each block of granite, cut and polished with impossible precision, fits into the next with a perfection modern engineers still struggle to replicate. There is no mortar, no binding agent, no trace of trial and error, just a seamless fusion, as if the rock had been softened, molded, and fused by hands that understood the mountain's language better than we do. Standing before these walls, one can't help but ask, who were they? Who possessed the knowledge to carve stone as if it were clay, centuries, perhaps millennia, before the Incas rose to power? The mountain holds its breath. The mist thickens, curling between terraces like memories of another age. Tourists climb the narrow paths, cameras in hand, unaware that beneath their feet lie unanswered questions. Questions that threaten to rewrite the very history of the Andes. Machu Picchu's official history begins in the mid-1400s, during the golden expansion of the Inca Empire. Yet radiocarbon samples, geological patterns, and local Quechua legends hint at something far older. Some terraces seem to predate known Inca construction. Some foundations belong to a style the Incas themselves never replicated anywhere else. Archaeologists admit, quietly, that parts of the site may have been built upon older ruins. So, what does that mean? It means that Machu Picchu may not have been built by the Incas at all. It may have been found by them, an inheritance from an unknown civilization, hidden by the mountains until they claimed it as their own. And that changes everything, because if that's true, then the Inca Empire, mighty as it was, may have been only the latest tenant in a far older story. A story stretching back into prehistory, when the Andes were home to peoples whose names have been erased by time, yet whose handiwork endures in stone. A civilization that may have mastered geometry, astronomy, and perhaps even technologies we've forgotten how to imagine. Every culture that came after spoke of them in reverence and fear. The builders before time, the Viracochas, white-bearded sages who emerged from the waters of Lake Titicaca after a great flood, bringing light to a darkened world. Legends, we are told, myths, but the stones, they don't lie. They remember. When Hiram Bingham discovered Machu Picchu in 1911, he was guided there by local farmers who already knew of its existence. To them, it wasn't a secret city of the Incas. It was a place of the ancestors, a city that had been there long before the empire rose. Bingham's eyes, trained by Western academia, saw what he expected to see, an Inca city. But perhaps what he really found was something the Incas themselves had stumbled upon centuries earlier, and maybe that's why the Spanish never found it. Because Machu Picchu was already hidden, not by time, but by purpose. The Incas built monuments of power, yes, but they also built upon sacred places. They sought the energy of older worlds, huacas they called them, the holy places where earth and spirit met. Machu Picchu, nestled between the peaks of Machu and Huayna, aligned perfectly with the solstices and the flow of the Urubamba River below. To the Inca priests, it was a portal to the heavens. To those who came before, perhaps, it was something more. The mountain exhales as the sun rises higher. Golden light brushes the terraces, and the stones seem to awaken. Every edge, every groove glows for a fleeting second, as if remembering. It feels almost alive. For a moment, you can feel the weight of forgotten centuries pressing against your chest. You can sense that this place, this summit of clouds and stone, is not just a ruin. It's a message carved not for the past, but for the future. And the question remains, who carved the message, and why did they hide it here, at the edge of the world? The wind howls between the peaks. Somewhere in that echo there is an answer, one that has waited for thousands of years to be heard. But to uncover it, we must go deeper, into the stones, into the myths, into the silence beneath the empire that claimed to have built it. Because what comes next will challenge everything we think we know about Machu Picchu. The arrival of the Incas. The wind howls between the peaks, carrying with it the echoes of a question too heavy to fade. If Machu Picchu was not built by the Incas, then who were the true architects of this mountain sanctuary? To begin unraveling this enigma, we must descend from the clouds of speculation into the world of empire, to the age when the Andes trembled under the golden standard of Tawantinsuyu, the Inca realm of the four quarters of the world. It was a civilization of order, symmetry, and devotion, yet also one of absorption. The Incas were not the first, nor the oldest. They were the inheritors of a vast Andean legacy. In the heart of Cusco, the navel of their empire, legends whispered that their ancestors had not risen from the soil like ordinary men. They had emerged from a sacred cave, Pacaritambo, the house of origin. There, 8 children of the sun god Inti stepped into the world, guided by their father's light, destined to bring civilization to chaos. Yet even these chosen ones spoke of peoples older than themselves, builders who had vanished before the Inca line began. The Incas were extraordinary administrators, engineers, and astronomers, yes, but they were also master restorers. They often built upon the ruins of those who came before, integrating ancient foundations into their own designs, as if continuing a dialogue started by forgotten architects. Everywhere their empire spread, they found remnants of mysterious walls, stones so perfectly carved that even their finest masons could not reproduce them. Instead of destroying them, the Incas worshipped them. They called them huacas, sacred relics of divine craftsmanship. When Pachacuti, the visionary emperor who transformed a small highland tribe into an empire, turned his gaze toward the sacred valley, he must have seen in those older stones the fingerprints of gods. The valley shimmered like a mirror of heaven, its rivers tracing the serpentine paths of constellations, its peaks aligning with the movement of the sun. For a ruler obsessed with cosmic harmony, there could be no greater symbol of divine authority than to build, or perhaps to reclaim, a city here. Machu Picchu, as we know it today, may have been that symbol. But the question remains, did Pachacuti create it, or did he restore it? The stones themselves seem divided in answer. Some bear the unmistakable marks of Inca craftsmanship, orderly terraces, trapezoidal windows, and elegant masonry characteristic of the 15th century. Yet beneath them lie walls of an entirely different nature, megalithic blocks, seamlessly fitted, shaped with a precision beyond explanation. The contrast is striking. The lower stones feel older, heavier, more deliberate, as though they were laid by hands belonging to another era, another world. Modern archaeologists often describe this as multi-phase construction, but what they rarely address is why the Incas, known for their architectural perfection, would build their citadel atop an existing structure so fundamentally different from their own style. Was it practicality, reverence, or an acknowledgement that this place was already sacred long before their time? The chronicles left by early Spanish explorers offer tantalizing clues and troubling contradictions. Pedro Chiesa de Leon, one of the most meticulous chroniclers of the conquest, wrote that many of the Incas' greatest sanctuaries were older than their memory, their true builders unknown. He described temples so ancient that even the elders of Cusco could not name their creators. One such place, he noted, was said to lie high among the clouds, hidden from the eyes of the unworthy. Could he have been describing Machu Picchu? If so, it would mean that by the time the Incas rose to power, Machu Picchu was already a place of myth, a forgotten city of the gods that they claimed as their own. In the Quechua tongue, Machu Picchu means old mountain. The neighboring peak, Huayna Picchu, means young mountain. Together, they represent the eternal dialogue between what was and what will be, the elders and the heirs. It is a fitting metaphor for the Incas themselves, the young inheritors of a much older legacy. The Incas brought structure to chaos, roads to wilderness, and order to empire. They built thousands of kilometers of stone pathways, stretching across deserts, jungles, and peaks, an achievement so vast that modern satellites still trace their roots today. Yet even with all their mastery, the Incas never left behind records of how they built Machu Picchu. No inscriptions, no codices, no carvings detailing its creation. It is as if they themselves didn't know, or perhaps didn't dare to claim the act as their own. There's a strange humility in their silence. When the Spaniards arrived, they burned, erased, and rewrote, but even they recorded fragments of awe. Some conquistadors spoke of walls that must have been built by giants, of stones too perfect for the hands of men. These whispers, filtered through the eyes of conquerors, echo the same question we ask today. If not the Incas, who? Perhaps the most unsettling clue lies not in what the Incas said, but in what they believed. Their creation myth tells of a time before the sun, when darkness ruled the earth, and a race of divine beings known as the Viracochas emerged to shape the land. They taught humanity agriculture, astronomy, and architecture before vanishing into the sea, promising to return when the world needed them once more. To the Incas, these were not myths, they were memory. So when they found ancient walls upon their mountains, they didn't question. They knew whose hands had shaped them. They called them the houses of the gods. They built upon them, not to imitate, but to honor. Standing at the threshold of Machu Picchu today, you can almost feel that continuity. The terraces built by the Incas rise gracefully over foundations that defy time. Each level speaks to a civilization revering another, layer upon layer, history upon memory, until the mountain itself becomes a temple to eternity. The Incas may have ruled the Andes, but even they were humbled by the stones they found. And perhaps that humility, that reverence, is why the place still stands, untouched by conquest, unbroken by time. But every legend has a fracture, every truth a shadow. And if Machu Picchu was inherited rather than created, then beneath its terraces may still lie the remains of those who built it first, a civilization erased from history, waiting to be heard again. The wind falls silent, the mountain listens, and in that silence, another mystery begins to stir, one carved not in myth, but in stone, because the next question is not who ruled here, but how these impossible walls were made, and that question will take us deeper still. The stone puzzle. The question lingers in the thin Andean air. How were the impossible walls of Machu Picchu built? To the casual visitor, they are simply impressive. Walls of gray granite stacked with elegant precision. But to the eye trained in stone, geometry, and ancient architecture, they are nothing less than a riddle carved in eternity. The stone puzzle, as some modern researchers call it, is not merely a feat of engineering. It is a statement, a declaration of mastery over matter itself. Each block, irregular in shape, fits its neighbors with surgical perfection. There is no mortar, no visible gap. Not even the width of a human hair separates one stone from another. When you slide your fingers along the seams, the surface feels alive, warm, as if the mountain still breathes beneath the weight of those walls. Conventional archaeology offers a tidy explanation. The Incas, through patience and skill, shaped each stone with hammerstones made of harder rock, grinding and fitting until perfection was achieved. Yet such explanations crumble upon closer inspection. Granite, the dominant stone of Machu Picchu, ranks among the hardest natural materials on Earth. It resists even modern steel chisels. How, then, could a civilization without iron tools, without wheels, and without written measurements achieve such supernatural accuracy? We are told it was done by trial and error, but there are no signs of mistakes. We are told it was done with ropes and levers, but some of these blocks weigh over 100 tons and lie at elevations where even modern cranes would falter. We are told it was done with time, but not even centuries of effort explain the seamless curvature of stones that look as though they were poured into place. To look upon those walls is to face a paradox. Either the builders possessed an understanding of stone beyond what we can imagine, or they had access to methods, perhaps technologies, that modern science has yet to rediscover. Some ancient engineers have proposed the idea of softened stone, a lost chemical or energetic process capable of temporarily liquefying rock. Others suggest acoustic or vibrational techniques, where resonant frequencies could alter the molecular structure of granite, allowing it to flow like wax before hardening again. These ideas sound fantastical until you stand before the stones themselves. The surfaces of the megaliths are not merely cut, they are molded. The curves between adjoining stones follow organic contours, almost like muscle tissue. The seams flow like the joints of a living organism. Even under modern microscopy, there are no tool marks consistent with chiseling or abrasion. Instead, there are smooth, glass-like transitions, as if the material had been shaped by heat or by something even subtler. When you observe the walls from a distance, the effect is hypnotic. They do not appear assembled, they appear grown. And this is not unique to Machu Picchu. The same phenomenon occurs across the Andes, at Sacsayhuamán, Ollantaytambo, and even the enigmatic ruins of Pumapunku in Bolivia. Each of these sites shares a common language of stone, polygonal blocks, seismic resistance, and an almost organic symmetry that defies our sense of human craftsmanship. Could this have been coincidence? Or are these sites fragments of a single architectural tradition, one that predates the Inca Empire by millennia? The Incas themselves, when asked by early chroniclers how they achieved such marvels, often shrugged and said the same words: "It was done by the gods." They claim to have only maintained what was already there. To them, these walls were not construction projects. They were inheritances. There is another mystery, one that modern tourists rarely notice. Many of Machu Picchu's stones bear subtle magnetic properties. Compasses behave erratically near certain walls, and electrical devices occasionally malfunction. Scientists attribute this to natural variations in the granite's mineral composition, yet one can't help but wonder, was this intentional? Did the builders understand something about the Earth's energy that we no longer grasp? Ancient Andean myths speak of living stones, rocks that could sing, hum, and respond to the vibration of prayer. The word rumi in Quechua means stone, but it also carries connotations of spirit and resonance. The Incas believed that matter itself was alive, that mountains and stones had consciousness, a will, a memory. Perhaps in their eyes, construction was not domination over nature, but collaboration with it. If the builders of Machu Picchu shared this worldview, then their mastery over stone might not have been technological in the modern sense, but spiritual, a harmony between human intent and the natural frequency of the earth, a lost science of resonance, half engineering, half invocation. The idea may sound poetic, until you recall that the walls of Machu Picchu are earthquake-proof. For over 500 years, while surrounding structures have fallen, these walls remain unmoved. Their irregular polygonal design distributes seismic energy with astonishing efficiency. Modern engineers admit that even with advanced modeling, it would be difficult to improve upon the design. Whoever built them understood something profound, not only about physics, but about the rhythm of the planet itself. And then there's the silence. No inscriptions, no symbols, no royal emblems carved into the walls. Unlike Egyptian temples or Mesopotamian ziggurats, these stones bear no written boast of ownership. The builders did not seek credit. They did not sign their work. They simply left it, waiting. Was that humility or a message? Perhaps they knew that one day another civilization, the Incas, or even ours, would come across their work and wonder. Perhaps that wonder was the message. At sunset, when the last light grazes the citadel and the granite turns gold, The walls seem to breathe again. Shadows flow across the seams like water, and for a fleeting second, it feels as though the entire mountain is alive, remembering its builders. There, among those stones, we stand before the most silent riddle of human history, a civilization we cannot name, a technology we cannot explain, a message we have not yet learned to read. But this puzzle extends far beyond the stones of Machu Picchu, because scattered across the Andes, across Peru, Bolivia, and even Ecuador, stand monuments carved in the same impossible language. And if all these structures share a common hand, then somewhere, buried beneath time, lies the truth of who they were, the builders before the Incas, the forgotten masters of the mountain, and their legacy, waiting beneath the empire that claimed their throne. Because what comes next will take us to the heart of that forgotten inheritance. The first doubts. The mountain remembers, but humanity forgets. And for centuries, Machu Picchu slept, shrouded in mist and myth, untouched by time, untouched by curiosity, until the modern world stumbled upon it again. Yet from the very first moment it was rediscovered, the silence of the stones began to challenge the story they were forced to tell. When Hiram Bingham first climbed through the dense jungle in 1911, guided by local farmers who had always known the ruins as a city of the old ones, he believed he had found the lost city of Vilcabamba, the final refuge of the Inca kings after the Spanish conquest. He was wrong, but his error would ignite a century of fascination and deception. Bingham's photographs, published by National Geographic in 1913, captured the world's imagination. A city above the clouds, untouched by Europe's conquests, preserved in perfect silence. The headlines called it the Lost City of the Incas. The name stuck. But even Bingham himself, while cataloging the site, began to notice details that disturbed him. Some walls looked entirely different from others. Some foundations were composed of massive stones that seemed far older, more eroded, and carved with a precision no Inca site elsewhere could match. And beneath the temples, he found strata of construction layered like the rings of a tree, evidence of multiple epochs of building. He wrote in his notes, "The lower stones are the finest, and the upper ones clearly later. The Incas could not have cut these foundations." But those lines never made it into the official narrative. They were buried, like so many inconvenient observations, under the growing weight of academic consensus. Machu Picchu had already become a symbol, a monument to Inca genius, national pride, and colonial romance. To question that narrative was to threaten more than history. It was to challenge identity itself. Still, not everyone remained silent. In the decades that followed, other voices began to whisper their doubts. Peruvian archaeologist Luis G. Lumbreras once admitted that the lower stones belong to a forgotten culture, one whose name we do not know. Jean-Pierre Pratzen, an architect who spent years studying Inca masonry, confessed that even with modern tools, he could not replicate the perfection of the megalithic joints. And Dr. Kenneth Wright, an engineer specializing in hydrology, discovered something extraordinary. The entire site was designed around a complex drainage and water distribution system so efficient that even after 5 centuries of rainfall, it still functions flawlessly. Who designed such perfection? The Incas, brilliant as they were, left no record of this level of hydraulic sophistication anywhere else. Slowly, the questions multiplied. Why does Machu Picchu contain no clear evidence of long-term habitation? Why are there no traces of workshops, marketplaces, or refuse, the signs of a thriving city? Why instead does it feel like a monument, a shrine, as though built not for living, but for remembering? Some researchers began to suspect that Machu Picchu was never truly an Inca royal estate at all, that it may have been a restoration, a sanctification of something far older, something the Incas found and repurposed for their own cosmic rituals. A huaca, a sacred place where heaven and earth touched, but whose hands had first consecrated it. To understand that, we must look at what the Incas themselves believed about their past. Their oral traditions spoke of Viracocha, the great architect of the world, who fashioned the mountains, the sun, and humanity itself. When he finished his creation, he traveled across the Andes, teaching the arts of civilization, before vanishing into the Pacific, promising to return. When the Spaniards arrived, many Andean priests mistook them for the returning Viracochas. The myth had lived so vividly that its echo shaped the fate of an empire. But there's a deeper question hidden within the legend. Were these gods symbolic, or were they memories of an older people, travelers, survivors, or beings of another world? When one compares the architecture of Machu Picchu to sites like Sacsayhuamán, Ollantaytambo, and especially the Bolivian ruins of Pumapunku, the similarities are impossible to ignore. Each site bears the same enigmatic craftsmanship, stones cut with angles that defy explanation, joints so tight that no blade of grass fits between them, and a knowledge of geometry and seismic balance that feels almost mathematical. Could it be that all these sites were fragments of the same forgotten culture? A civilization that once spanned the spine of the Andes, long before the rise of the Inca Empire, perhaps even before the last ice age ended? Mainstream archaeology dismisses this notion as pseudoscience, but dismissing a mystery does not solve it. For every neatly drawn timeline, the Andes offers an anomaly: radiocarbon samples out of sequence, myths that echo global flood narratives, and linguistic patterns connecting distant cultures across oceans. The early Spanish chroniclers, men like Garcilaso de la Vega and Cieza de León, hinted at this dissonance. They described ruins so ancient that even the Incas themselves revered them as the work of the gods. They wrote of temples built before the age of darkness, and of builders who vanished when the sun was born. If those were metaphors, they were powerful ones. If they were not, then history, as we know it, is missing an entire chapter. Even the Incas seemed haunted by that missing chapter. Their word for ancient, ñaupa, does not merely mean old, it means before time. And the language preserves another curious term, ñaupahuaca, literally sacred thing from before time. Many of the oldest megalithic sites of the Andes were known by this name. To them, Machu Picchu may not have been a city at all, but a ñaupahuaca, a relic of the world before theirs. When you realize that, the silence of the stones becomes deafening, because perhaps it isn't that the Incas left no inscriptions. Perhaps they weren't allowed to. Perhaps they understood that what they found belonged to something beyond their empire, beyond human vanity itself. And maybe that's why Machu Picchu feels so different from any other ruin in the world. It doesn't tell a story of kings or conquest. It tells the story of continuity, of one civilization quietly preserving the last breath of another, an echo of the builders before time. The first doubts, then, are not acts of rebellion. They are acts of remembering. Because once you see the cracks in the official story, you can never unsee them. And once you begin to hear the whisper of those ancient stones, you realize that the real mystery of Machu Picchu is not who lived there, but what was remembered there. The clouds thicken once more over the terraces. The mountain grows quiet, as if listening to the echo of its own forgotten name. And in that stillness, one truth becomes clear. The Incas may have inherited the city, but the builders, the true architects, remain nameless, yet not entirely lost. For their traces still lie hidden beneath the empire's shadow, and to uncover them, we must go deeper still, into the time before the Incas, because what we find there will defy every boundary of recorded history. Beneath the Inca mask, the clouds part for a moment, and the mountain reveals its bones. Beneath the terraces of Machu Picchu, beneath the polished symmetry that dazzles the eye, lies another world, a world of older stones, older alignments, and older intentions, a world that the Incas did not create, but inherited. For decades, excavations on the site have focused on surface structures, temples, plazas, and terraces, but few have dared to dig deeper. Those who did found something that didn't fit the neat chronology of textbooks. Beneath the classic Inca masonry, those recognizable trapezoidal windows and smooth blocks, archaeologists discovered massive weathered foundations made of stones, far larger, far heavier, and far more eroded than anything built in the Inca period. These megalithic underlayers rest like ancient vertebrae beneath the citadel, as though Machu Picchu was built upon the skeleton of a forgotten city. In 2010, a team led by French researcher Thierry Jamin used ground-penetrating radar to scan beneath the Temple of the Sun. What they found shocked them. Hidden cavities, tunnels, and chambers extended beneath the site, some filled with metals that reflected the radar's signal in strange ways. The Peruvian authorities quickly halted further exploration, the official explanation to preserve the sanctity of the site. But among local guides and independent archaeologists, a different rumor spread that beneath Machu Picchu lay sealed chambers containing pre-Inca relics, perhaps even the remains of a civilization the Incas themselves had tried to protect. This wasn't the first time such whispers had surfaced. For centuries, Quechua oral traditions spoke of pacarinas, sacred entrances to the underworld, places where humanity had emerged after the Great Flood. One legend told of a hidden chamber beneath the mountains of the Sacred Valley, guarded by the spirits of the ancestors. The people called it Ñaupa Iglesia, the ancient church. When explorers finally reached it in the 20th century, they found not a church, but a portal carved directly into the mountain, an impossible doorway leading into solid rock, flanked by polished walls bearing the same megalithic precision found in Machu Picchu and Sacsayhuamán. Whoever carved that portal had access to techniques far beyond the chisels of the Inca period. And strangely, its orientation aligns perfectly with the solstices, as if marking a cosmic event long forgotten. These are not coincidences. The same patterns repeat across the Andes. Older megalithic bases supporting younger Inca masonry, like masks placed over ancient faces. At Ollantaytambo, the pattern is unmistakable. The lower walls of the Temple of the Sun are made of colossal stones, each weighing up to 90 tons, their edges melted together with dreamlike smoothness. Above them, smaller stones, unmistakably Inca, rest like afterthoughts, almost crude by comparison. At Sacsayhuamán, the same story unfolds. At Cusco, beneath the colonial churches, lie walls so ancient that even the Incas claimed they were the work of the gods. This layering of civilizations, megalithic, Inca, and then Spanish, forms a kind of geological stratigraphy of human memory. The deeper you dig, the older and more mysterious the stone becomes. Modern dating methods struggle to measure these differences. The granite used in Machu Picchu and other sites resists carbon analysis, leaving only the erosion patterns as clues. Some stones show levels of weathering that could suggest exposure for thousands of years, far longer than the short reign of the Inca Empire. Others display lichen growth patterns consistent with extreme age, older even than the supposed founding of Cusco itself. Archaeologist Alfredo Valencia once remarked that, "To study Machu Picchu is to study two cities, one visible, one invisible. The visible one belongs to the Incas. The invisible one belongs to someone else." Who, then, were they? Local legends speak of the Wari, an ancient Andean civilization that predated the Incas by centuries. But the Wari left a different signature: crude masonry, adobe, and simple stonework. The builders beneath Machu Picchu were something entirely different. Their craftsmanship suggests a knowledge of energy, magnetism, and geometry that seems almost alien to Andean prehistory. Some researchers propose that the builders belonged to a civilization even older, perhaps related to the mysterious Tiahuanaco culture of Bolivia, whose ruins at Pumapunku show the same melted stone features. Others point to cataclysmic evidence, massive floods, landslides, and tectonic upheavals that may have erased entire chapters of human history in the Andes. Could these megalithic sites be the remnants of a civilization that perished in such a disaster, one whose survivors became the ancestors of the Incas? Even the Incas themselves seem to believe this. Their myths tell of the world's destruction by water, after which Viracocha commanded a few chosen survivors to rebuild civilization atop the ruins of the old. Perhaps Machu Picchu was one of those places, a sacred site where the new world was built over the bones of the old. There's another deeper layer to this mystery, one hidden not in stone, but in alignment. When astronomers mapped the site, they discovered that the geometry of Machu Picchu corresponds not only to solar and lunar cycles, but to patterns that no longer match the current tilt of Earth's axis. In other words, the original layout may have been designed in an epoch when the sky itself looked different. If true, that would place its foundations thousands of years before the official timeline, perhaps even before the last pole shift at the end of the Pleistocene. To the orthodox historian, such ideas are heresy. To the mountain, they are memory, because every civilization wears a mask. The Inca mask, golden, radiant, magnificent, hides the face of something much older, much quieter, and perhaps much wiser. What we call Machu Picchu may not be a singular creation, but a palimpsest, a city written over itself, layer after layer, until the original message was buried beneath centuries of reverence and fear. Standing there, among the terraces and temples, you can feel that hidden pulse beneath your feet, the heartbeat of a civilization that refuses to die even when its name has been erased. The mountain is alive because they are still here, in its foundations, in its stones, in the silence that no archaeologist can measure. The Incas built upon their memory, we built upon their myth, and beneath it all, the original builders still wait, waiting for the day when the mask is lifted, when humanity is finally ready to look beyond empire, beyond conquest, beyond chronology, and remember. Because beneath the Inca mask lies the oldest face of all. And the next step in this journey will take us closer to that forgotten face, to the builders before time. The builders before time. The mountain keeps its secrets well. It watches unmoving as generations climb its slopes, searching for truth. But those who listen, truly listen, hear something older than empire, a heartbeat pulsing beneath the granite, whispering of an age when the Andes themselves were still young. Before the Incas, before the Wari, before recorded history, the people of the highlands told stories. Stories of luminous beings who descended from the sky or rose from the depths of the sacred lake. They called them Viracochas. Tall, bearded, clothed in radiant garments, these beings were said to have taught humankind the arts of civilization, agriculture, architecture, astronomy, before vanishing into the Pacific Ocean, promising to return when darkness fell upon the world again. To the Western scholar, these were myths. To the Andean heart, they were memory. In Quechua and Aymara oral traditions, the Viracochas were not gods in the distant heavens. They were teachers who once walked among men. They brought light after the age of darkness, when the world had been swallowed by a great flood. And they did not teach through words. They taught through stone. Across the Andes, from Lake Titicaca to Cusco and beyond, one finds the same fingerprints. Stones cut with impossible precision, megaliths aligned to the rising sun, and subterranean chambers that echo like tuning forks when struck. These were not random monuments. They were instruments, harmonies frozen in granite, and together they speak the same language, the lost language of the builders before time. Who were they? Some legends claim they came from the island of the sun, a place that once shone in the middle of Lake Titicaca before it sank beneath the waves. Others say they came from the stars, from the constellation of the Pleiades, Kolka, the storehouse of souls. And a few, whispered only in mountain villages, speak of survivors, the last remnants of a world destroyed when fire and ice consumed the earth. When you hear these tales alongside the physical evidence, the melted stones of Pumapunku, the impossible angles of Sacsayhuamán, the foundations beneath Machu Picchu, the myth begins to sound like history. Perhaps these gods were not celestial beings, but an advanced civilization lost to cataclysm, a civilization whose memory became legend, whose science became magic, and whose ruins became holy. Even the Inca kings believed they ruled in the shadow of these forgotten masters. Pachacuti, the visionary emperor credited with expanding the Inca Empire, took his very name from an ancient prophecy, Pachacutic, the one who overturns the world. He saw himself as a restorer, not an inventor, one destined to revive the order of the old world. And in his temples he placed effigies of Viracocha, the great architect, as the ultimate source of all creation. But when asked where Viracocha came from, the priests answered with a single phrase. He came from the waters, from the time before time. Archaeology, for all its methods, often dismisses such statements as poetic. Yet everywhere the myths point, the stones seem to confirm. At Tiwanaku, near Lake Titicaca, the Gate of the Sun stands aligned to a solar calendar that matches not our current orbit, but that of an era more than 10,000 years ago, when the tilt of the Earth was different. At Pumapunku, blocks of andesite were cut with geometric precision achievable only with machine tools, or something equivalent. And at Machu Picchu, beneath the Inca terraces, we find those same megalithic signatures, curves that flow like liquid stone, corners that defy conventional carving, and alignments that trace constellations long forgotten. Could all of this be coincidence? Or are these scattered remnants the fragments of one vanished civilization, one that may have spanned from the Andes to Egypt, from Sumer to the Indus, long before our known history began? Some researchers, like Arthur Poznansky in the early 1900s, believed so. He proposed that Tiwanaku, and by extension the Andean megalithic tradition, belonged to a civilization that flourished at least 17,000 years ago, before a global flood reshaped the continents. Mainstream academia laughed at the notion then, but as modern geology uncovers evidence of rapid climate shifts and rising sea levels around 12,000 years ago, Poznansky's lunacy begins to sound prophetic. What if the Andes were once home to a people who survived that cataclysm, a civilization that rebuilt the world after the waters receded, using the mountains as their refuge? Perhaps Machu Picchu was not a beginning, but a memorial, a monument to survival, a whisper left in stone by the survivors of a lost earth. The Incas, inheriting their ruins, may have felt the sacred gravity of those places. They aligned their roads with ancient paths, their temples with ancient foundations, their myths with ancient stars, because somewhere deep in their memory they knew they were not the first. They were the continuation. Every empire, it seems, carries the bones of one before it. And when the stones speak, through alignment, proportion, and silence, they all tell the same story, that humanity has risen and fallen many times, each civilization inheriting fragments of a truth too vast to hold. Modern archaeologists may call it coincidence, but myth, geology, and the stones themselves form a different equation, a hidden geometry of memory that spans continents, a message carved by the builders before time to those who would one day stand in their shadow and wonder. When the sun sets behind Machu Picchu and the last light catches the granite peaks in gold, the shape of the mountain mirrors the constellation of Orion. In that moment, the earth and the sky align, as if remembering each other. And perhaps that was the builder's true message, that the heavens and the earth were never separate, that to build in stone was to speak with the stars, that civilization itself was a reflection of what came before and what must come again. The Incas built upon their memory, we now build upon their myth. But the builders before time, they built upon eternity, and the question now is not whether they existed, but where they left the rest of their message. Because if Machu Picchu was only one chapter of their legacy, then the next may lie hidden across the Andes, in walls, in stars, and in forgotten alignments waiting to be read once more. What came next would begin to reveal just how vast their presence truly was. Echoes in stone. The wind that circles Machu Picchu does not die there. It travels over peaks, valleys, and deserts, carrying the same whisper to every sacred site of the Andes. A whisper carved in stone, repeating a forgotten language. And if one listens closely, one hears it in every wall, every terrace, every echo that returns from the mountains. Because Machu Picchu is not alone. It is part of a constellation of impossible structures: Sacsayhuamán, Ollantaytambo, Tambo Machai, Paisac, and far beyond them, the cyclopean ruins of Pumapunku and Tiwanaku in Bolivia. Each stands as an island of mystery. Each bears the same signature: stonework so perfect that even earthquakes cannot move it, alignment so precise they trace the heavens, and silence so profound it feels alive. These are the echoes in stone, the scattered remains of a civilization whose knowledge transcended geography. And though time, conquest, and erosion have broken the surface of their message, the rhythm beneath remains unbroken. Let us begin in Cusco, the navel of the world. High above the modern city rises Sacsayhuamán, a fortress of unimaginable scale. Its walls twist like serpents of granite, composed of blocks weighing up to 200 tons, each interlocking in a pattern both geometric and organic. The stones fit not by shape alone, but by intention, as though molded into harmony. No mortar binds them, yet they have endured centuries of earthquakes that shattered every later structure. Standing before them, you feel something uncanny, not simply engineering, but intelligence, a resonance, as if the stones themselves are aware of their purpose. Move north to Ollantaytambo, the so-called storehouse of the gods. There, colossal pink granite monoliths, some over 50 tons, were dragged from a quarry 6 miles away across the Urubamba River and up steep cliffs. No records, no tools, no plausible method explains how. Even with cranes and pulleys, the feat defies logic. But it's not only the transport that mystifies, it's the artistry. The faces of the stones show surfaces so flat, so precise, that they reflect light like mirrors. And their angles match those of Machu Picchu. Same inclinations, same ratios, same cosmic geometry. Coincidence, the textbooks say. Echo, the stones reply. Further south, on the high plain of Titicaca, lies the ancient city of Tiwanaku and its sister site, Pumapunku. Here, the enigma deepens beyond imagination. Blocks of diorite and andesite, materials harder than steel, are cut with machine-like accuracy, forming perfect right angles and interlocking patterns like industrial molds. Microscopic analysis shows precision down to fractions of a millimeter. Some cuts appear to have been made by rotary tools or saws, yet no such technology existed in the pre-Columbian Andes. Archaeologists say the Tiwanaku culture built it around 500 CE, but the erosion and magnetic alignment suggest something far older, perhaps dating back to the end of the last ice age. The question arises: why does the same architectural fingerprint appear in sites separated by hundreds of miles and thousands of years? Why the same style of polygonal masonry, the same astronomical alignment, the same silence in their record? Perhaps the answer lies in a deeper pattern, one not of culture, but of consciousness. What if these sites were not cities in the modern sense, but nodes, points on an energetic map that connected heaven and earth? A vast geomantic network built by the builders before time, mapping the resonance of the planet itself. Recent research by independent geomorphologists and archaeoastronomers has revealed something astonishing. When the coordinates of major Andean megalithic sites are plotted on a map, they align along geodesic lines corresponding to magnetic anomalies and ley lines, invisible currents of Earth's electromagnetic field. It is as if the ancients understood that energy does not flow randomly across the planet, but in precise, harmonic patterns, and they built their temples and fortresses exactly where those currents converge. Machu Picchu, Sacsayhuamán, and Tiwanaku are not isolated wonders. They are chords in a planetary symphony. When connected, they form a spiral, a sacred geometry that mirrors the golden ratio and the motion of the Milky Way. Coincidence? Or knowledge carried through millennia from a civilization that mapped both the earth and the stars as one living organism? The Incas themselves hinted at this truth. They called their empire Tawantinsuyu, the realm of the four quarters. At its center stood Cusco, connected to the four corners by sacred roads known as seques. Each seque aligned with specific temples, mountains, and celestial events, forming a terrestrial reflection of the sky. To the Inca priests, this was no metaphor. It was the architecture of the cosmos made stone. But what if the CK system, that cosmic map, was not invented by the Incas, but inherited from the builders before time? What if the Incas merely restored an older network, one that had once spanned the entire Andean range? If so, Machu Picchu may have been more than a royal estate or sanctuary. It may have been a frequency hub, a site built on one of the Earth's energetic intersections, harmonizing the flow between mountain, river, and star. Local shamans still speak of these energies today. They call them seek lines, channels of power that connect the sacred sites of the Andes. During solstices, they say, the mountains speak to one another, exchanging energy through light, sound, and vibration. To Western ears, this sounds mystical, but to physics, it sounds familiar. Resonance, after all, is real, a principle by which frequencies align and amplify each other across great distances. Perhaps the ancients understood that the earth itself was an instrument, and the megaliths, its tuning forks. When you stand at Machu Picchu at sunrise and listen to the wind humming through the stones, you can almost feel it, that faint vibration beneath your feet, echoing the same rhythm you'd hear at Tiwanaku or in the hollow chambers beneath Sacsayhuamán. It's as if the mountains themselves are speaking, connected by a network of resonance that transcends time. The builders before time may have vanished, but their song remains. It hums in the silence of stone, in the alignment of the stars, and in the pulse of the earth itself. And if these echoes are fragments of their lost science, then understanding them could change everything we know about ancient civilization. Because it would mean the Andes were not just the cradle of one empire, but the heart of a forgotten world. But before we can decode that ancient language of stone, we must look up to the sky the builders worshipped, the constellations they mirrored, and the cosmic order that guided their every line. Because above the Andes, the heavens hold the other half of the message. And the next discovery would reveal how the stones of earth and the stars of heaven were bound together in one great design. The cosmic alignment. Above Machu Picchu, the night sky stretches like an ancient map, one older than civilization itself. The stars seem closer here, brighter, almost sentient, and perhaps that is not illusion, because for those who once built upon these mountains, the heavens were not distant lights in the void. They were the living mirror of Earth, a reflection of everything sacred below. In the Andean worldview, the sky and the land were one continuous body. Every constellation had a twin upon the ground. Every river mirrored a celestial stream. The Incas called this divine symmetry Hanan Pacha, the upper world, and believed that the stones of their cities were placed to echo the order of the stars. But long before the Incas looked upward, another people had already carved that cosmic harmony into the earth itself. Machu Picchu is not merely aligned with the sun, it is woven into the fabric of the heavens. Its main axis follows the path of the Urubamba River, a serpentine flow that mirrors the Milky Way as it winds through the sky. At dawn on the solstices, the first light of the sun pierces the temple of the sun through a precisely angled window, illuminating a single sacred stone. At the same moment, the constellation of the Southern Cross hovers directly above the peak of Huayna Picchu, completing a triad of earth, light, and star. Such perfection is not coincidence, it is orchestration. Archaeoastronomers who mapped the site discovered that every major structure, the Intihuatana stone, the sacred plaza, the royal mausoleum, aligns not only with solar events, but also with stellar coordinates tied to the Pleiades, Orion, and the galactic center. To the Andean mind, these were not random clusters of light, they were living entities. celestial ancestors who governed the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. The Intihuatana stone, often called the hitching post of the sun, was believed to anchor the star's energy to the earth, but its true power may have gone deeper. When measured, the stone's angles form a miniature model of the surrounding mountains, and its orientation mirrors the tilt of Earth's axis during the winter solstice. It is both calendar and compass, clock and altar, an astronomical instrument disguised as art. Some researchers speculate it was used to calculate not only the solstice but also the precession of the equinoxes, a celestial motion that takes 26,000 years to complete. If true, it would mean that whoever designed it understood cosmic cycles far beyond the reach of recorded Inca science. But Machu Picchu is only one note in a symphony. Across the Andes, the same celestial logic appears again and again. At Sacsayhuamán, the zigzagging walls trace the outline of the Milky Way's celestial serpent. At Tiwanaku, the gate of the sun frames the rising of the constellation Orion during the equinox. At Nazca, hundreds of miles to the south, colossal geoglyphs stretch across the desert, some shaped like birds, monkeys, and spirals, all aligned to star positions and solstice markers. Together, they form a planetary observatory, one that spans mountain and desert alike, all tuned to the same cosmic rhythm. To the modern mind, it seems impossible that ancient builders could have coordinated such precision across vast distances. But the builders before time may have seen the world differently. They did not separate heaven from earth. To them, the sky was not above, it was within. The cosmos was not observed, it was experienced. Every star had a resonance, every planet a tone, every mountain a frequency. And in their sacred architecture, they sought to harmonize those vibrations, to bring the earth into tune with the music of the spheres. Even today, Andean shamans perform ceremonies that echo this ancient principle. They call it Aini, sacred reciprocity, the balance between giving and receiving, between human and cosmos. In their rituals, they face the sky and the mountains simultaneously, offering to both, as if speaking to one being. Perhaps this was the true essence of their science, not to dominate nature, but to resonate with it. Modern astronomy confirms what the ancients intuited, that the Milky Way arches above Peru in near-perfect correspondence to the Urubamba River below. The Incas called that celestial river Mayu, the heavenly stream. They saw in it the mirror of life flowing through the cosmos, and they placed their most sacred cities along its earthly reflection, from Ollantaytambo to Machu Picchu and beyond. When viewed from the air, these cities form a pattern that seems almost deliberate, like the constellations they emulate. Cusco, shaped like a puma, marked the heart. Machu Picchu, nestled between two peaks, mirrored the eye of the feline. Ollantaytambo represented the tail, the direction of movement, of cosmic flow. To the builders before time, architecture was not merely physical, it was symbolic, even alchemical. Each city was a chakra of the earth, channeling celestial energy into matter. This sacred geometry of the Andes finds echoes across the world. In the pyramids of Egypt aligned to Orion, in the ziggurats of Mesopotamia facing the rising sun, in the megaliths of Europe tracking lunar cycles. Could it be that all these ancient structures were expressions of a single global knowledge, one that saw the planet not as separate civilizations, but as one organism breathing in rhythm with the cosmos? If so, then the builders before time were not simply architects, they were cosmologists, custodians of a universal science that united physics, spirit, and geometry, a knowledge we have lost, but which still vibrates through the stones. At night, when the last visitors have gone and the winds fall silent, Machu Picchu becomes what it was always meant to be, a temple of the stars. The terraces glow under moonlight. The granite peaks outline constellations older than memory. and the Urubamba below flows like liquid starlight through the valley. In that silence, you begin to understand this was not merely a city. It was a message to the cosmos, written in stone, a declaration that humanity once knew its place in the greater order, and a reminder that we are not above the heavens, but part of them. When dawn returns and the first light touches the Intihuatana, it is as if the sun itself acknowledges the message, pausing just for a moment to listen, because the builders before time did not simply build for the gods, they built with them. And in the next stage of this story, that divine partnership would face its greatest challenge, the coming of conquest, silence, and deliberate forgetting. The Spanish, silence. It began with the sound of hooves. In the year 1532, the Andes, land of sun and silence, trembled under the arrival of armored men who came from across the sea. They rode into the sacred valley carrying crosses and cannons, speaking of salvation but bringing conquest. And in that moment, the ancient dialogue between heaven and earth, a conversation that had lasted for millennia, was severed. To the Spanish chroniclers, the empire they found was a golden wonder, ordered and vast. To the priests who followed them, it was heresy incarnate, a world guided not by the Christian God, but by celestial forces, living mountains, and gods of stone. What they could not understand, they destroyed. What they could not destroy, they buried. But beneath the burning temples and toppled idols, the memory of the builders before time lingered, hidden in symbols, whispered in hymns, carved into the stones that refused to fall. When the conquistadors reached Cusco, they marveled at the walls of Sacsayhuamán, stones taller than men, heavier than faith itself, locked so tightly together that no blade could pass between them. They asked the Inca nobles how such wonders had been built. The nobles, with quiet defiance, answered, "These were made by our ancestors, those who came before the sun." The Spaniards scoffed. They called it superstition, the ramblings of pagans. But privately, even some among them felt unease, for the walls defied logic, the temples defied gravity, and the silence of their builders haunted them. Garcilaso de la Vega, son of a conquistador and an Inca noblewoman, wrote decades later, "The Indians say that in ancient times, before the reign of the Incas, there were other men here, men of great stature, who raised the first walls of stone." He tried to preserve the memory, but his writings were censored, edited, and eventually ignored. The Church had no patience for tales that placed divine power in human hands. The campaign to erase the old world was swift and relentless. In Cusco, the Temple of the Sun, Coricancha, was stripped of its gold, its idols melted down to coins. Over its foundations, the Spaniards built the convent of Santo Domingo, a Christian monument standing on the bones of a cosmic temple. In churches across Peru, the same pattern repeated, Inca walls below, Catholic stone above, a literal conquest of faith over foundation. But the stones did not yield. Even as cathedrals rose, the megalithic blocks beneath them remained unmoved, enduring earthquakes that shattered the conqueror's walls. It was as if the earth itself rejected the silence being imposed upon it. The Spaniards called the old gods demonios, demons, and banned their names. The priests outlawed rituals, burned sacred textiles, and executed shamans who refused to convert. But in the highlands, far from the cities, the people remembered. They spoke the forbidden names in whispers, Viracocha, Pachamama, Inti. They hid their offerings beneath crosses, disguised their ceremonies as masses, and turned the images of saints into masks for the old deities. The Spanish silence was never complete. It only drove the old songs underground. In their desperation to control the narrative, the chroniclers rewrote history. They declared that the Incas were the first and last great civilization of the Andes. Everything before them, the megalithic walls, the melted stones, the cosmic alignments, became the work of superstition or accident. The builders before time were erased, transformed from ancestors into myths, from memory into metaphor. Yet in every ruin, the contradiction remained visible. The Incas built skillfully, yes, but differently. Their style was elegant, functional, and unmistakably distinct from the megalithic foundations beneath it. Still, the textbooks of Europe would not tolerate two truths. There could be only one, and it had to fit the timeline of empire. So the scholars wrote, Machu Picchu was built in the 15th century, and the world believed them. But belief is fragile when faced with stone, because while the Spaniards silenced the priests, the stones kept speaking, in geometry, in light, in endurance, and over time, the silence began to fracture. In the late 16th century, earthquakes ravaged the Andes. Churches collapsed, cities crumbled, but the ancient walls, the pre-Inca megaliths, stood firm, unmoved. People began to whisper again, the old gods protect their work. Priests called it blasphemy, the people called it truth. Centuries later, explorers and archaeologists returned, uncovering what the church had buried, only to wrap the ruins in new dogma, a secular one. Science replaced faith, but the outcome was the same. The mystery of the builders before time remained forbidden, hidden behind a wall of academic pride. The Spanish silence never truly ended. It merely changed its language. Where once the church said, this cannot be, for it defies God, modern institutions now say, this cannot be, for it defies chronology. And yet the mountains remember, the people remember. In secret rituals, in songs sung in Quechua at dawn, they still honor the ancestors before the sun, those who shaped the world before the Incas, before the conquest, before memory itself. Somewhere in those rituals lies a key, not only to history but to identity, because perhaps the greatest loss was not the temples or the gold, but the understanding that humanity once saw itself as part of a greater harmony, a bridge between the stars and the soil. The conquistadors thought they were silencing a people. In truth, they were silencing a knowledge, one that may have held the secret of our origin and our destiny. And though the chronicles were censored, though the temples were crushed beneath the weight of empire, the stones endure, speaking without words, defying time, waiting for those who can still hear. But deep within those surviving myths, one name continues to echo through the centuries, a name the church tried hardest to erase, a name that might hold the key to the mystery of the builders themselves. That name is Viracocha, and what follows is not mere legend, but the shadow of a truth that refuses to die. The secrets of Viracocha. His name drifts through the mist of time like the memory of light itself. Viracocha, the great architect, the maker of all. He was the God who wept the world into being, the teacher who walked among men, the one who came from the sea and vanished into it again. But who, or what, was Viracocha? To the conquistadors who first heard the name, he was an enigma, a god both alien and familiar, described not as a radiant spirit or feathered deity, but as a man. A tall figure, white-skinned, with a flowing beard and eyes full of power. He carried a staff that glowed like fire, and wherever he walked, the land was healed and order was restored. When he spoke, the mountains listened. When he wept, the oceans rose. The Spaniards, stunned by the similarities to their own Christian iconography, believed the Incas were describing Saint Thomas, or perhaps even Christ himself, a sign, they said, that divine revelation had reached the New World long before Columbus. But the truth was far older, far deeper. For the name Viracocha predates the Inca Empire by centuries. His temples were ancient, long before Cusco was built. And his legend stretches not only across Peru, but through the highlands of Bolivia, Ecuador, and Chile, whispering of a God who built the world with knowledge, not with miracles. In Quechua, Viracocha means sea foam, the luminous essence that gave birth to all things. He was not merely a deity. He was the consciousness of creation, the breath between heaven and earth. In the Andean cosmovision, he emerged from the waters of Lake Titicaca, sculpted the mountains, kindled the sun, and formed the first humans from stone. But his creation rebelled, so he destroyed them in a great flood and began again, from survivors, from seed from silence. Does that sound familiar? Floods, divine teachers, and rebirth. These are motifs found in every ancient civilization: the Sumerian Utnapishtim, the Hebrew Noah, the Hindu Manu, the Greek Deucalion. It is as if all these stories point to the same ancestral memory, a cataclysm that reset humanity, and the appearance of teachers who came to rebuild what was lost. Viracocha was one of those teachers, and perhaps in some forgotten epoch, he was one of them. The temple dedicated to him, Tiwanaku, at the edge of Lake Titicaca, is among the oldest sacred sites on Earth. Here stands the Gate of the Sun, carved from a single block of andesite, weighing over 10 tons. Its surface is etched with symbols, not of Inca origin, but of a much older code. Solar glyphs, star clusters, and a central figure bearing a staff in each hand, the staff god. His face, serene yet commanding, radiates power. Archaeologists call him the sun god. The local Aymara people call him Viracocha. The carvings on the gate are not random decorations. Mathematicians have discovered that they form a complex astronomical calendar, mapping solar and lunar cycles, eclipses, and even the 26,000-year precession of the equinoxes. Whoever designed it was not a mythmaker. They were an astronomer, a geometer, a scientist, a keeper of cosmic time. If Tiwanaku was indeed the cradle of Viracocha's legend, then Machu Picchu and the other sacred cities of the Andes may have been built upon his legacy. The builders before time, perhaps, were the priests of Viracocha, bearers of a knowledge that saw no divide between heaven, earth, and humanity. In their worldview, architecture was prayer and stone was scripture. When the Incas rose to power, they did not replace this god. They adopted him, honored him. Their own creator, Illapa, or Apu Kontiti Wirakucha Pachaya Chachik, was said to be the same being, the instructor of the world. Even the Inca emperor, the Sapa Inca, claimed descent from him. To rule was to carry the lineage of the builder, but over time, that knowledge faded, fragmented into ritual, and was lost to empire. When the Spaniards arrived, they recognized the danger of this memory. A god of creation who preceded their own narrative, one who spoke through nature rather than scripture, was intolerable, so they silenced his name. Missionaries destroyed his idols, renamed his temples, and replaced him with saints. But the people never forgot. In remote villages, the farmers still raise their eyes to the dawn and whisper, "Viracocha, Father of Light." They do not pray to him, they pray with him, as if rekindling an ancient friendship. Who, then, was Viracocha? A myth? A teacher? Or a survivor from a lost world? Some fringe scholars and ancient astronaut theorists suggest he may have been one of the so-called sky beings, travelers from another civilization, another star. Others propose he was a remnant of an advanced human culture destroyed by the cataclysm at the end of the last ice age, a culture that spread across the world to teach the remnants of humanity. If so, then Viracocha may have been the Andean reflection of a universal archetype, the civilizing god who walks the earth after the flood, known as Quetzalcoatl in Mexico, Osiris in Egypt, and Oannes in Mesopotamia. Different names, same pattern. Different tongues, same teacher. Perhaps he was not a god at all, but a memory, the embodiment of a wisdom so profound it appeared divine. The builders before time may have been his disciples, guardians of his science, which blended physics with spirit, stone with star. They built monuments to preserve that knowledge, encoded in geometry, resonance, and cosmic alignment, messages that could survive the collapse of civilizations and the erosion of language. Maybe that is the true meaning of Machu Picchu and Tiwanaku, not temples of worship, but vaults of memory, stone libraries that whisper to those who still know how to listen. In the myth, after finishing his work, Viracocha walked westward across the Pacific, disappearing into the horizon. But before he left, he promised he would return, when the world was once again in darkness. To the Andean people, that prophecy was both hope and warning. To the Spaniards, it was a dangerous idea. They saw it in the eyes of every rebel who rose against them, the belief that the builder would come again, and perhaps he never truly left. Perhaps his presence endures in the stones, in the rhythm of the earth, in the human longing for balance between heaven and matter. Because Viracocha was not just a being, he was a principle, the spark of creation itself, the whisper that teaches humanity how to build, how to align, how to remember. The Spanish silence could not erase him. Time could not erode him, for he was carved into the geometry of the world. And what if his prophecy was not about return, but remembrance? What if his coming back meant us rediscovering what he taught, rebuilding what was lost, reawakening what sleeps within the mountain? Because maybe, just maybe, Viracocha never left the Andes at all. Maybe he became the mountain. Maybe he is the mountain. And the next revelation will take us to the edge of that possibility, to the idea that Viracocha's civilization, the builders before time, may have been the true Atlanteans of the Andes. The Andean Atlanteans, long before Machu Picchu rose above the clouds, long before the Incas named their gods, the earth shook, seas rose, mountains cracked, the sky itself seemed to fall. And in that chaos, in that drowning of worlds, an entire civilization vanished. The survivors called it the Great Flood. The Greeks called it cataclysmos. The Sumerians called it the deluge of Utnapishtim. And in the Andes, they called it Unu Pachacuti, the turning over of the world by water. The story is always the same: arrogance, destruction, and rebirth. But hidden within the poetry of myth lies a possibility so profound it terrifies history itself, that the legends are not metaphor, but memory. When Plato wrote of Atlantis, he claimed the story came from Egypt, passed down by priests to the philosopher Solon. It told of a mighty empire that existed 9,000 years before his time, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, an island of enlightened builders, masters of geometry, astronomy, and energy. They lived in harmony with the cosmos until they turned their knowledge toward domination. Then the earth rebelled. In a single day and night of misfortune, Atlantis sank beneath the waves. To modern ears, it is myth. To the stones of the Andes, it may be autobiography. Because if the builders before time were the same architects who left their mark in Tiwanaku, Pumapunku, and Machu Picchu, then they may have been the highland inheritors of a civilization that perished in the flood, survivors who climbed to the peaks to escape the rising seas. The Andes, with their eternal summits, would have been the perfect refuge for those fleeing a world consumed by water. And the memory of that cataclysm runs deep in Andean lore. According to Inca tradition, Viracocha unleashed a flood to destroy a corrupted humanity. Only a few survived, seeking refuge in caves and mountain sanctuaries. When the waters receded, Viracocha commanded them to repopulate the world, teaching them once more how to build, how to grow, how to remember. Is this not the same story told by Plato, by Noah, by every civilization that looked back upon a vanished age? What if the Atlanteans were not a people of one island, but of one era, a world civilization that collapsed under the weight of its own brilliance? What if the Andes preserve their final chapter? When you stand before the Gate of the Sun at Tiwanaku, you see the same geometry that adorned ancient temples in Egypt. When you measure the angles of Machu Picchu, you find the same ratios that define the pyramids of Giza, the golden proportion, the alignment with Orion's belt. Even the Andean cross, the chacana, reflects a cosmological symbol found from Sumer to the Indus Valley, a map of the world divided into four, encircled by the void. These are not coincidences. They are fingerprints, echoes of a shared language of the sacred, spoken by civilizations separated by oceans, but united by memory. Could it be that before the Great Flood, the earth knew a different humanity, one capable of feats we can scarcely imagine, a civilization that built not for conquest, but for resonance, that carved stone not for shelter, but for symphony? If so, the Andes were not the beginning of civilization, but its preservation, a seed bank of knowledge planted at the roof of the world, awaiting rediscovery. Modern geology lends quiet support to the myth. Around 12,800 years ago, as the last ice age ended, the Earth experienced a sudden cataclysm. Glacial floods, massive fires, and a rapid rise in sea levels erased entire coastlines. Scientists call it the Younger Dryas event. To the ancient world, it was the day the ocean rose, and perhaps the day Atlantis sank. Satellite studies of the Altiplano, the vast plateau surrounding Lake Titicaca, show traces of what appeared to be submerged city grids, canals, and terraces, now buried beneath sediment and water. The lake itself sits at 12,500 feet above sea level, yet its fossils include marine shells, suggesting that its waters were once connected to the ocean before the land rose during a massive tectonic upheaval. Could this have been the cataclysm Viracocha's myths describe? A memory not of mythic imagination, but of planetary trauma? Tiwanaku, which now lies miles from the lake's shore, may once have been a seaport, a gateway to a civilization that spanned the Andes when the climate was gentler, the atmosphere thicker, and humanity different. When the flood came, the survivors moved upward, carrying fragments of their technology, their knowledge, and their faith in cosmic balance. They became the builders of the highlands, the Andean Atlanteans. Archaeologist Arthur Posnansky, often dismissed for his heresy against official timelines, estimated Tiwanaku's original construction at around 17,000 BCE, a date that places it at the twilight of the Ice Age. He based this on the site's astronomical orientation, which no longer matches the current position of the solstice. Only a shift in Earth's axis, a planetary reset, could explain the discrepancy. If he was even partially correct, then Tiwanaku predates every known civilization on Earth. And what if those builders, the Atlanteans of the Andes, carried with them not only physical tools, but a spiritual technology, a science that harmonized with the planet's magnetic field, using sound, water, and vibration to shape reality itself? Perhaps that is why their stones seem melted, as if softened by frequency rather than flame. Perhaps that is why their cities align with constellations that no longer match our sky, because they were built under a different world. To the Orthodox historian, such ideas are fantasy, but to the stones, they are memory, and memory cannot be erased by skepticism. If Atlantis did fall, its last refuge may not have been beneath the Atlantic Ocean, but above the clouds, among the Andes, where the survivors of the flood rebuilt the world with what little they remembered. Their knowledge fragmented, their language lost, but their purpose intact, to keep the flame of cosmic harmony alive. The Incas, inheriting their temples, may have been the last keepers of that legacy, the stewards of a forgotten light. And when they vanished under Spanish conquest, that light dimmed once more, hidden in the mountain's heart. But the myth of Viracocha, the god who survived the flood, who rebuilt the world, who promised to return, may be the memory of that civilization's fall and rebirth. The Andean Atlanteans may not be a legend at all. They may be us, humanity's earlier reflection, staring back from the depths of prehistory, warning us of what happens when knowledge outpaces wisdom. For as Plato warned, Atlantis was not destroyed by nature alone, but by its own pride. And perhaps that warning was carved, not in Greek, but in granite, across the Andes, where the earth itself still remembers. Because what comes next in this journey will unveil the evidence of that cataclysm, the geological scars, the flood lines, and the cosmic shifts that marked the end of that world, the age of water, the great erasure, and the rebirth that followed, the great cataclysm. It began not with thunder, but with silence, the kind of silence that comes before the end of worlds. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, and then the heavens cracked open. Across the planet, the sky bled fire. Comets tore through the atmosphere, igniting forests, melting glaciers, and boiling oceans. The Earth shuddered on its axis as if trying to remember its balance. In a span of days, or perhaps hours, the age of the builders came to an end. This was the great cataclysm, the moment when myth became geology. Around 12,800 years ago, the Earth entered a sudden, violent cooling period now known as the Younger Dryas. Glacial ice that had been retreating for millennia surged again, and temperatures across the world plummeted in less than a human lifetime. But before the cold came, the fire. Scientists today believe that fragments of a massive comet struck the northern hemisphere. The evidence lies in a layer of black sediment, rich in platinum and nanodiamonds, found across 4 continents. The same layer marks the boundary between 2 epochs, before and after the flood. In the wake of impact, glaciers melted at unimaginable speed. Sea levels rose more than 400 feet. Entire coastlines disappeared. The ocean devoured plains. Mountains collapsed into valleys, and the thin crust of human civilization, whatever it had been, was wiped from the map. To those who survived, it must have felt as though the gods had turned against them. In Sumer, they called it the deluge of the gods. In Genesis, it became the flood of Noah. In the Andes, the Inca elders remembered it as Unu Pachacuti, the world turned over by water. And in their stories, Viracocha, the great architect, wept for humanity and then rebuilt the earth anew. For millennia, scholars dismissed these stories as allegory, but geology tells the same tale in stone. In the high plateaus of Peru and Bolivia, we find fossilized seashells at 12,000 feet, marine life stranded among the clouds. Sediment layers around Lake Titicaca show sudden influxes of salt water mixed with freshwater species, as though the ocean itself had once invaded the mountains. Entire valleys in the Sacred Valley region bear scars of massive ancient floods. Giant boulders tumbled and polished as if rolled by waves hundreds of feet high. And beneath the calm surface of Lake Titicaca, sonar surveys have revealed the ruins of what appear to be terraces, walls, and paved roads, a sunken city that predates recorded history. To the Aymara people, that lake is sacred because, they say, it remembers. It is the womb of the world, where Viracocha began again after the flood. What if these legends describe not divine wrath, but planetary memory, a story of survival told by those who witnessed the collapse of an age? If so, then the builders before time were not mythical gods, but witnesses of the Earth's last great reset, survivors of the cataclysm that erased their world. The evidence reaches beyond the Andes. In North America, thousands of miles away, burn marks scar the soil where vast ice sheets once stood, remnants of ancient wildfires so intense they could be seen from space. In the Middle East, deserts conceal layers of silt that once were riverbeds. In Antarctica, radar has revealed buried mountain ranges and freshwater lakes locked beneath the ice, as though frozen mid-transformation. Everywhere the same pattern emerges, a sudden global event, rapid, violent, and final. Humanity, it seems, carries that trauma in its collective soul. The flood myths are not fantasies. They are memories of grief, and in the Andes, the grief took the form of stone. The survivors, perhaps those who would later be remembered as the disciples of Viracocha, began to rebuild. But their rebuilding was not mere architecture. It was atonement. They carved the mountains not to defy nature, but to harmonize with it. They built temples aligned with the stars, not to glorify power, but to honor balance. They sought to restore the rhythm that had been lost. The Incas, inheriting those stones millennia later, preserved that reverence. Their very name for time, Pachacuti, means world reversal, the end and rebirth of ages. It is both catastrophe and renewal. To them, the Great Flood was not the punishment of gods, but the breath of the cosmos, the earth exhaling its sorrow, preparing to begin again. Could it be that the builders before time, the Andean Atlanteans, understood this rhythm better than we do today? That they foresaw the coming destruction and encoded their knowledge in indestructible stone, hoping that someday we would remember? Perhaps that is why Machu Picchu was built where it stands, high above the flood line, immune to the tides, protected by the mountain's spine. a refuge for knowledge, a beacon for the next dawn of humanity. Even today, the scars of that event are visible. Massive erratic boulders lie scattered across Peru, as though dropped by a retreating sea. Sediment deposits show that rivers once ran in directions opposite to their current flow. Entire valleys bear traces of rapid erosion consistent with megafloods. The earth itself seems to whisper, "It happened." But if the great cataclysm destroyed the builders' world, it also preserved their message. For in their final acts, in their cities, temples, and alignments, they left behind a code, a way to rebuild, to realign, to remember. They built for eternity, not for empire. They built for the next humanity, for us. Perhaps that is the reason why the myths of floods and rebirth appear in every culture, because we are the children of survivors. Our ancestors carried the memory of water in their bones and the wisdom of the builders in their hearts. They looked to the stars not for comfort, but for direction, for the promise that what was lost could be found again. And now, as modern science rediscovers the signs of that ancient apocalypse, the stones of the Andes stand as silent witnesses to a truth older than history. Civilization is not a straight line. It is a cycle of creation, destruction, and remembrance. And we, perhaps, are closer to the next turning than we dare to believe. Because the builders before time may have known something we have forgotten, that every world eventually ends. But what truly matters is what survives the flood. And in the Andes, what survived was not just stone, it was knowledge. A knowledge written in geometry, resonance, and alignment. A science of harmony between heaven and earth. And in the next chapter of this story, that knowledge will begin to reawaken as science and myth finally meet again. The stone resonance theory. When we look at the megaliths of Machu Picchu, of Sacsayhuamán, or Pumapunku, we see solid, immovable monuments, cold, silent, eternal. But what if that is an illusion? What if, in the hands of the builders before time, these stones were not static at all, but fluid? What if the mountains could sing? The stone resonance theory proposes exactly that the ancients possessed a form of vibrational technology, a lost science of sound and frequency, which allowed them to alter matter at its molecular level, not through brute force, but through harmony, through resonance. In physics, resonance occurs when an object vibrates at its natural frequency and begins to amplify energy from its surroundings. It is what makes a crystal sing when struck, or a bridge collapse when the wind matches its rhythm. Sound, when precisely tuned, can move mountains. Literally. Modern experiments have shown that acoustic levitation can lift small objects, even droplets of liquid, using only vibration. Imagine scaling that knowledge to the monumental. Imagine stones responding not to hammers, but to song. According to legend, the builders of the Andes, like those of Egypt and Tibet, spoke to the rock. They chanted as they worked, using drums, flutes, and horns to create deep, resonant tones. The stone, they said, softened, becoming light enough to move. To modern ears, it sounds impossible. Yet even in the highlands of Peru today, elders speak of the days when the stones danced. At first glance, it seems pure myth, until you look closer at the evidence. The surfaces of certain megalithic walls, particularly at Sacsayhuamán and Ollantaytambo, display a curious trait. The edges of blocks appear slightly rounded, almost melted, as though the rock had been molded rather than chiseled. There are no tool marks, no fractures, no chips. Instead, the joins are perfect, a kind of geological welding. Even the corners flow like the seams of metal cooled from a liquid state. But granite and diorite require temperatures of over 2,000 degrees Celsius to melt, far beyond anything achievable with ancient fire. So what could have caused such perfection? Enter the realm of vibration. Certain frequencies, particularly in the low Hertz range, can alter the molecular cohesion of materials, reducing internal friction and density. Theorists suggest that the builders before time may have harnessed this principle, using harmonic resonance to loosen the crystalline structure of the rock. In that temporary state, the stones could be shaped, moved and fused as though they were clay. When the vibration ceased, they solidified again, locked forever in form. It may sound fantastical, yet traces of this idea persist in ancient traditions across the globe. In Tibet, monks are said to have lifted stones by chanting in perfect harmony, directing sound toward the object with horns and drums. In Egypt, temple walls depict priests using rods and bowls to call the stones into place. And in the Andes, oral legends tell of Viracochas who sang to the earth and commanded the mountains to move. Perhaps these are not metaphors. Perhaps they are fragmented memories of a real science, a sacred physics that understood matter as vibration and the universe as symphony. Modern researchers have begun to rediscover hints of this truth. Acoustical studies of ancient temples show that their chambers amplify specific frequencies. At the Temple of the Sun in Cusco, a low tone of 110 hertz produces a standing wave that reverberates through the granite itself, creating the sensation that the stone is vibrating underfoot. In the subterranean tunnels of Tiwanaku, the resonance is even stronger, deep, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. These frequencies correspond to the natural vibration of the Earth's crust, the Schumann resonance, oscillating around 783 hertz, the very rhythm of life. The builders before time, it seems, were tuning the planet itself. Even Machu Picchu hums. When the wind moves through the site at dawn, the terraces produce faint tones like a buried organ. The sound is not random. Each terrace amplifies a different harmonic. When combined, they form a chord, a sound that is felt more than heard, as though the city is still singing its purpose to the sky. Could this have been their secret? A technology based not on conquest of nature, but communion with it, shaping matter through the same principles that govern music, light, and life itself? In this view, every stone was an instrument, every wall a note, and the entire city a composition. Machu Picchu was not simply built, it was played into being. Even the name of the god Viracocha hints at this. In some interpretations, Vira relates to breath or spirit, and Cocha to water or vibration. He was, quite literally, the breath upon the waters, the vibration that gave birth to creation. If his followers understood sound as the essence of being, then it follows that they used it to shape the world. And perhaps that is why their cities have endured while ours crumble. Our civilizations are built on dominance. Theirs were built on resonance. Where we impose, they attuned. They listened to the Earth's frequency and built in harmony with it. Scientists studying earthquake resistance in Andean masonry note something remarkable. Those irregular interlocking walls absorb seismic waves like soundproof panels. They vibrate, but do not break, as if they were designed not to resist the earth, but to move with it. In other words, they were built to sing in tune with the planet. The stone resonance theory may remain speculative, but it forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth, that ancient civilizations may have understood energy and matter in ways that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. They may have seen the world not as mechanical, but as musical. And in that vision, creation itself was symphony, a harmony between consciousness and cosmos. Perhaps that is why standing before Machu Picchu feels less like visiting a ruin and more like standing inside an instrument, one still vibrating faintly with the memory of its builders, one that hums even now in the key of eternity. And if they truly built through resonance, through sound and alignment, then maybe their legacy extends deeper than stone. Maybe it lives in us, in the vibration of the heart, in the pulse of thought, in the music of existence itself. Because to the builders before time, the universe was not silent, it was alive, and it was always singing. And what comes next will reveal that this song may still carry through our very blood, in the forgotten genes of the Andes, DNA of the Andes. The stones sing their story. But what if that same song lingers, not only in the mountains, but in us? What if the secret of the builders before time is not buried beneath the Andes, but written in the blood of those who still walk among them? In the last few decades, advances in genetics have allowed us to trace the migrations of humanity like never before. DNA, it turns out, is a time machine, a molecular archive that records every journey, every mixing of peoples, every echo of forgotten worlds. And when scientists turned their gaze to the peoples of the Andes, they found something strange. For centuries, the conventional story held that the first inhabitants of South America descended from small bands of hunter-gatherers who crossed the Bering Strait from Asia some 15,000 years ago. They moved slowly southward, populating the continent in waves. But the genes tell a more complex tale. While much of the Andean genome does indeed trace back to that migration, a portion, small but significant, does not fit anywhere. It belongs to a lineage that appears older, deeper, and unique. It is as though a branch of humanity took a different path, or perhaps began already here. In 2007, a study led by geneticist Fabricio Santos at the Federal University of Minas Gerais analyzed mitochondrial DNA from pre-Columbian mummies found near Cusco and Lake Titicaca. The results challenged the accepted model. These ancient individuals shared haplogroups that diverged tens of thousands of years before the supposed peopling of the Americas. Even more astonishing, some sequences bore resemblance not to Siberian or East Asian markers, but to populations from the South Pacific, and, in rare cases, to European Paleolithic lineages. The finding was quietly archived. It didn't fit the timeline, yet whispers of such anomalies continued to surface. In the highlands of Peru, some indigenous groups carry genetic traits that appear to resist hypoxia, the lack of oxygen at extreme altitude, more effectively than any known adaptation. Their blood carries higher concentrations of hemoglobin and nitric oxide, allowing them to thrive at elevations where others would perish. This adaptation appears ancient, so ancient, in fact, that it predates the Inca Empire by millennia. It is as though their bodies remember the mountains themselves. How long must a people live with the sky to breathe like it? 10,000 years? 20? Or since the age when the mountains first rose from the sea? To the Aymara and Quechua elders, such questions are not scientific. They are spiritual. They say their ancestors were born from the mountains, not migrated to them. That their blood carries the memory of the stone, the river, and the condor. They call themselves Runa, the people, but also Runa Simi, those who speak the tongue of the living earth. In their worldview, blood and rock are not separate substances. They are different states of the same essence. Modern anthropology might call this myth, but myth often guards truth, and perhaps that truth is now resurfacing through the silent language of genetics. Further south, near Lake Titicaca, researchers have found cranial remains with elongated skulls, not the result of artificial binding, but of natural bone structure. These skulls possess larger cranial capacity, wider occipital plates, and unusual sutures. They belong to individuals who lived more than 4,000 years before the Incas, in what was once the heartland of Tiwanaku. Who were they? Their DNA, tested in 2018 by independent researchers, revealed haplotypes unlike any other found in the Americas, neither purely Asian nor Polynesian, but something in between, something isolated, something that should not exist. Could these have been the remnants of the builders before time, a population of survivors carrying the last biological traces of an older humanity, a civilization born before the flood, whose genetic signature lingers like an echo in the high-altitude peoples of the Andes? Even mainstream studies hint at an anomaly. In 2020, genomic analysis of Andean mummies from the Chinchorro culture revealed that their mitochondrial lineages diverged far earlier than expected, suggesting a separate evolutionary pathway. Meanwhile, certain Y chromosome markers in modern Andean populations appear to have no clear ancestral source, as if they emerged spontaneously, cut off from the global genetic tree for tens of millennia. It is as though the Andes were not merely a refuge of stone, but of blood, a vault of human diversity preserving what the rest of the world forgot. When viewed through this lens, the myth of Viracocha takes on new meaning. Perhaps the white-bearded gods described in chronicles were not visitors from across the ocean, but descendants of a distinct lineage, the last offspring of the builders. Over time, as their civilization faded and mixed with others, their memory transformed into legend. Their blood diluted, but never disappeared. In the language of the ancients, lineage was not just biological, it was vibrational. The runa believed that spirit and matter intertwined through energy, that ancestry was carried not only in flesh, but in frequency. If the builders mastered resonance, perhaps they also understood that DNA itself, the double helix of life, is a vibrating molecule, humming with the same harmonics as the stars. Modern science has proven this. DNA resonates in measurable frequencies, responding to sound and light. The building blocks of life literally sing. Could it be that the stone resonance theory and the genetics of the Andes are two facets of the same forgotten science? When the wind moves across the sacred valley, it sounds like breath through an ancient flute. To the scientists, it is mere air. To the shamans, it is the whisper of ancestry, the song of those whose bones became mountains. Maybe that is why, when you meet the eyes of a Quechua elder high in the Andes, you feel something older than time looking back at you. A calm, a wisdom, a silence that carries the weight of ages. Their faces are carved like the stones of their ancestors, weathered, luminous, eternal. Perhaps because they are the last living link to the builders before time. Not through myth, but through molecule. The stones may have forgotten their names, but the blood remembers the song. And somewhere in that melody, in the quiet hum of DNA, lies the proof that humanity has lived, died, and lived again. And as the genetic record expands, it is leading science to an uncomfortable threshold. That civilization is not a linear ascent from primitive to advanced, but a cycle of awakening and amnesia. And that the knowledge of the builders may not be lost, merely sleeping within us. Because perhaps we are not descendants of the builders before time. Perhaps we are their continuation. And what awakens next will remind us who we really are. Chronology wars. Every civilization leaves behind ruins. But the ruins of the Andes have left behind something more dangerous. Questions. Questions that archaeology cannot easily answer, and that some would rather not ask at all. For more than a century, the official story has stood like a monument of its own. According to academic consensus, the Inca Empire flourished between the 13th and 16th centuries. Before them came the Wari, the Tiwanaku, and a handful of pre-Columbian cultures tracing back roughly 3,000 years. Beyond that, the Andes, we are told, were empty, a silent stage waiting for civilization to arrive. But the stones of Machu Picchu, Tiwanaku, and Pumapunku whisper otherwise. They tell of craftsmanship older than the empire, older than memory, perhaps older than history itself. And so began what researchers now call the chronology wars, a battle fought not with swords or guns, but with data, dogma, and pride. On one side stand the orthodox scholars, armed with carbon dating, stratigraphy, and peer-reviewed journals. On the other side stand a growing band of revisionists, archaeologists, geologists, engineers, and seekers who refuse to believe that the timeline of human civilization begins only 5,000 years ago. Between them lies the forbidden zone, the possibility that humanity has risen and fallen more than once. It all began with anomalies, small cracks in the wall of certainty. In 1929, archaeologist Arthur Poznansky claimed that Tiwanaku's astronomical alignments pointed to a construction date around 17,000 BCE, based on the position of the solstice relative to the gate of the sun. Orthodox academia dismissed his work as fantasy. They said he miscalculated, that he misread erosion, that he wanted too much from the stones. But in the decades since, modern measurements have confirmed that the site's solar axis indeed does not match current celestial positions. Something changed. The sky itself shifted. Either Poznansky was wrong, or the world was older than we think. Then came the radiocarbon contradictions. At Machu Picchu, some organic materials embedded between megalithic joints dated thousands of years earlier than the supposed Inca construction. At Pumapunku, buried sediment layers beneath the foundations tested far older than the Tiwanaku culture above them. Each result was treated as an outlier, an anomaly, a word scholars use when evidence does not obey the narrative. But when the anomalies outnumber the certainties, one must ask, which is the true anomaly, the data or the story? The problem, however, runs deeper than evidence. It lies in the psychology of time. For centuries, the West has clung to a linear view of history, the belief that civilization evolved from primitive to advanced in a straight line of progress. To admit that a sophisticated culture may have existed before the Ice Age is to collapse that line, to admit that the cycle of rise and fall is eternal, and such a revelation would not only rewrite textbooks, it would rewrite humanity's self-image. But truth is rarely welcome at the banquet of certainty. Modern science now finds itself cornered by its own discoveries. Satellite imaging reveals lost cities beneath the Amazon. LiDAR scans uncover vast networks of roads and canals buried under the jungle canopy, evidence of societies that flourished thousands of years before the Inca. Geologists studying erosion at Tiwanaku estimate that some structures have been exposed for more than 10,000 years. Even seismic data beneath Lake Titicaca hints at older construction lying below the silt. Unreachable, unacknowledged, inconvenient. Still, official institutions remain silent. To extend the timeline of the Andes means to challenge not only archaeology, but anthropology, linguistics, even theology. For if the builders before time truly existed, then the human story did not begin in Mesopotamia. It began somewhere much older, perhaps everywhere at once. And so, the guardians of the orthodox timeline defend their fortress. They cite Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is best, but simplicity is not always truth. Sometimes truth is complex, layered like the mountains, hidden beneath the sediment of our own assumptions. To question the narrative is to risk exile from academia, ridicule from peers, loss of funding. The chronology wars are not fought in excavation sites. They are fought in conferences, in journals, in whispers over grants. A war of silence, more than speech. Yet slowly, the cracks widen. Geologist Dr. Robert Schoch, famous for his work on the Sphinx, has argued that the same kind of erosion seen on Egyptian monuments appears on Andean megaliths, erosion caused by thousands of years of rainfall, not mere centuries. He dares to suggest that both Egypt and the Andes may share a forgotten epoch, a pre-cataclysmic world where global cultures exchanged knowledge across oceans long before recorded time. In the realm of orthodox archaeology, such a claim is heresy. But science progresses not through comfort, but through discomfort. Even within the academic walls, quiet dissent grows. Some younger archaeologists admit, off-record, that certain findings don't fit the model. They speak of polished basalt stones found beneath Inca foundations, of tool marks microscopic in scale, of unexplained magnetic anomalies in sacred sites. They speak softly, fearing ridicule. The old guard calls them pseudo-archaeologists, but perhaps they are something else entirely. Rememberers, because the war over chronology is not just about dating stones, it is about remembering who we are. If civilization is older than we think, then humanity is older than its own forgetfulness. The builders before time may not be legend, but our own ancestors, reflections of a knowledge we have forgotten how to use. Even in myth, the cycle repeats. Creation, destruction, renewal. Every empire believes it is the first. Every scholar believes his model is complete. Until the earth shakes, the sky shifts, and another truth rises from the dust. Perhaps the real anomaly is our arrogance, the belief that we stand at the pinnacle of time, rather than on the ruins of forgotten ages. Perhaps the builders were not a mystery to solve, but a message to heed, that wisdom does not ascend, it returns, like the tide, like memory, like the sound of stone. And as the chronology wars rage on, the Andes remain silent, patient, unbothered. They have seen empires rise and fall. They have seen priests, conquistadors, scholars, and skeptics. They have outlived them all, and when the arguments fade, the stones will still be there, humming the same truth. That time is not a line, but a circle. And at the center of that circle lies something even stranger, a doorway that connects this world to the one before it. A gate carved in stone standing like a threshold between dimensions of time. The Stargate of the Sun. The Stargate of the Sun. At the edge of the Bolivian highlands, where the air thins and the world seems to shimmer between reality and dream, stands a stone that does not belong to time. It is called Puerta del Sol, the Gate of the Sun. Carved from a single monolith of andesite, it rises like a doorway to nowhere. Its lintel bears a god with a radiant crown, tears upon his cheeks, and two staffs in his hands, the image of Viracocha, the great architect. Around him, spiral geometric glyphs and winged figures, their meaning long forgotten. Some say it marks the solstice, others say it marks the threshold of worlds. Whatever it marks, it does not end where it appears to, because when sunlight passes through that gateway on the solstice dawn, something strange happens. The rays fall perfectly upon a series of symbols etched at its base. Symbols that, when mapped, correspond to the pattern of constellations seen over the Andes more than 15,000 years ago, an epoch before Tiwanaku, before the Incas, before recorded time. To the ancients, this was not architecture, it was technology, a resonant, energetic portal meant to synchronize earth and sky, and perhaps something more. Throughout the Andes, the motif repeats, doorways carved into living rock, leading to nothing but stone. Yet the people call them puertas, marcayuk, or ñaupahuacas, doorways to the world before time. They say these were not entrances for bodies, but for souls, portals through which the builders could travel between realms, not by walking, but by vibrating. One of these is Hayu Marca, the Gate of the Gods. Hidden in the mountains of southern Peru, it is an immense doorway carved into a red sandstone cliff, 23 feet tall, 20 feet wide, and perfectly symmetrical. It leads nowhere. Its center bears a small circular depression, as if once fitted with a disc, a key. Local legend tells that thousands of years ago, a high priest named Amaru Muru fled from the Temple of the Seven Rays, carrying a golden disc, a sun key, said to open the portal. When he pressed it to the niche and recited the ancient incantations, the doorway shimmered with blue light. The priest stepped through it and was never seen again. The people said he passed into the lands of the gods, promising to return when the stars aligned once more. To skeptics, it's myth. To physicists studying quantum resonance, it sounds oddly familiar, because a doorway that connects different vibrational states of reality is not just the stuff of legend, it's the essence of modern physics. The universe, after all, is vibration. Every atom, every photon, every strand of DNA resonates with frequency. Change the frequency, and you change the reality it occupies. Perhaps the builders before time understood this not as theory, but as practice, a sacred technology that merged consciousness, geometry, and resonance to move through dimensions. Even today, visitors to Hayu Marca speak of strange sensations. Compasses spin, cameras malfunction. Some hear low humming, like distant flutes. Others claim to see flashes of light within the doorway at dusk. The local Pacos, Andean shamans, say the portal still breathes, that at certain times of the year, when the stars of Orion and the Pleiades rise together, the stone awakens. They perform rituals there not to summon but to remember. to tune themselves to the same frequency as the gods. Could these doorways, scattered from Tiwanaku to Machu Picchu, have been part of a vast network? A system of energetic gates aligning with celestial coordinates designed to connect sacred sites across the Andes and beyond? When mapped, many of these gates form straight lines that correspond to solstitial paths, magnetic anomalies, and even ley lines that stretch across oceans, linking the Andes to Egypt, to Easter Island, to the Himalayas. Perhaps these were not mere structures, but nodes in a planetary grid, the skeleton of an ancient technology of consciousness. At Tiwanaku, the Gate of the Sun stands at an exact azimuth of 270 degrees, due west. The setting sun on the equinox passes through it in perfect symmetry. This orientation is mirrored by the Gate of the Moon on the opposite side of the site, due east. Together, they form an axis, a cosmic alignment marking not only day and night, but life and death, matter and spirit. The builders may have believed that to pass through these gates, physically or spiritually, was to transcend duality itself, to walk not between spaces, but between states of being. What if Machu Picchu, too, was built upon such a threshold? The Intihuatana stone, the hitching post of the sun, stands at the mountain's highest point, aligned precisely with the passage of the sun during the equinox. Shamans say that meditating there during solstice opens the inner gate, a portal of consciousness, not stone. Perhaps this was the builder's true science, mastering vibration to synchronize mind, matter, and cosmos. To them, the gate was not a passage to elsewhere. It was a mirror, revealing that the other world is not distant, but nested within this one, that heaven is not above, but through. Every time they built a doorway in the mountain, they were building a doorway in the soul, and if that knowledge once guided them, perhaps it also guided their disappearance. Maybe the builders before time did not perish in the flood. Maybe they passed through, leaving the physical realm as their monuments turned to stone. They did not die. They transitioned, and the portals they left behind were their fingerprints, invitations for us to follow when we were ready. The Incas called such places ñaupahuacas, sacred things from before time. They approached them not as travelers, but as pilgrims, knowing that these gates were not to be crossed lightly. Each one was a test, not of strength, but of frequency. Only a heart in harmony with the earth could enter. Only those who had remembered the ancient song. Maybe that's why these portals still hum today, because the song has not been fully forgotten. It still vibrates within us, waiting for recognition. For perhaps the true Stargate of the Sun is not in Tiwanaku, nor in Hayumarca, nor in Machu Picchu. It is within consciousness itself. The bridge between memory and matter, between what we were and what we are becoming. And as we reach the end of this path, the question changes. It is no longer who built these stones. It is why were we meant to find them now? Because the mountain's silence is ending, and deep within its core, something ancient is stirring, as if the gate, long dormant, is beginning to awaken once more. The hidden chamber beneath the terraces of Machu Picchu, beyond the polished stones and the tourist trails, lies a silence thicker than rock, a silence that has endured for millennia. It is said that within that silence, something sleeps. Not a myth, not a god, a chamber. For decades, rumors of hidden tunnels beneath the city of the clouds have circulated among guides, explorers, and shamans alike. Some call them ñaupawasi, houses of the ancients. Others whisper that they are the sealed vaults of Viracocha's disciples, containing the last fragments of a forgotten technology, or the remains of those who once walked between worlds. Whatever they are real, and the mountain guards them well. In 2010, a French-Peruvian expedition led by archaeologist Thierry Jamin used ground-penetrating radar to scan beneath the Temple of the Sun, one of Machu Picchu's most sacred structures. What they found defied expectation. Beneath the circular temple, the radar revealed a network of cavities and tunnels, some rectangular, others perfectly circular, connected by narrow passages. At the center lay a larger void, a chamber, reflecting a metallic signature. It was not a natural formation. Something had been placed there. Jamin's team requested permission to excavate. The Peruvian Ministry of Culture refused. Their statement was brief. No further exploration is allowed. The site must remain undisturbed. To protect the ruins, they said. But to those who have walked the sacred path, it sounded more like protection of a secret. In the years that followed, whispers spread. A few researchers claimed that similar anomalies had been detected beneath Tiwanaku, Ollantaytambo, and even Sacsayhuamán. Subterranean tunnels, hidden doors, sealed chambers, all aligned with astronomical markers. It was as if the builders before time had buried something intentionally, perhaps knowing their world would fall. A message, a relic, or maybe a seed for the next dawn of civilization. Some say these chambers contain tablets of gold, engraved with the knowledge of the ancients, geometry, star maps, and histories from before the flood. Others believe they hold crystalline devices, artifacts that could harness energy through resonance, tools not of superstition but of science lost to time. To the local shamans, however, the treasure is not metal or stone. It is memory. They say the chambers are alive, living archives of vibration, and that those who enter unprepared risk losing their mind or remembering too much. There is an old Quechua prophecy that speaks of the Cori Intihuasi, the golden house of the sun, hidden beneath the mountain where the sky and earth meet. It is said that one day, when humanity is ready, the chamber will open, not by force, but by harmony, that it can be unlocked only by sound, by resonance, by the same frequency that shaped the stones themselves, a musical key for a musical world. This prophecy mirrors ancient accounts from across the globe. The Hall of Records beneath the Sphinx in Egypt, the Cave of the Ancients in Tibet, the 7 cities of gold sought by conquistadors. Different names, same memory, a secret preserved beneath sacred ground, waiting for us to grow worthy of its revelation. Could these legends be connected? Could it be that the builders before time left vaults across the earth, storing their wisdom in resonant chambers that could survive floods, fire, and forgetting? If so, Machu Picchu may be one of those vaults, a library written not on paper but in vibration. In 2020, high-resolution scans confirmed what Jamin's team had first detected a decade earlier: anomalous cavities beneath the Temple of the Sun. When sonic mapping was used to measure their density, the results revealed hollow spaces consistent with metallic or crystalline structures. Once again, excavation was denied. Official reports claim that there is nothing of interest, yet no further data has been released. The silence deepens, but silence, like stone, can speak, and what it whispers is simple. The ancients did not hide their secrets from us. They hid them for us. Perhaps they knew that knowledge, in the wrong hands, could destroy, that wisdom without balance invites catastrophe, so they buried it, locking it behind layers of stone and consciousness, encoding the key in myth, geometry, and DNA. Only when humanity rediscovered harmony, the resonance between science and spirit, would the gates reopen. Only then would we remember. Even now, explorers report strange phenomena around these supposed entrances. Electronic devices fail, compasses spin. Some hear low hums, others feel the ground vibrate beneath their feet. The shamans say that this is the breathing of the earth, the chambers exhaling through the mountain, reminding us that the builder's legacy is still alive. At Tiwanaku, researchers from the University of Puno recorded infrasonic frequencies emanating from below the Gate of the Sun. The sound, barely audible to the human ear, resonates at 7.8 Hertz, the exact frequency of the planet's Schumann resonance. Coincidence? or deliberate design. Perhaps the builders encoded their archives not in stone tablets, but in frequency itself, a living database accessible through consciousness, not excavation. If that is true, then the hidden chamber is not a place at all. It is a state, a vibration within the human mind that can only be accessed by those who remember how to listen. Just as the stone resonance theory suggests that the builders sang to shape the world, perhaps they also sang to preserve it, imprinting their wisdom into the mountain's very atoms, waiting for the next awakening. Maybe that is what the Incas meant when they said Machu Picchu was a Huasi Viracocha, the house of the Creator, a place where knowledge sleeps, dreaming of its return. And if one day that chamber opens, if its resonance calls to us again, it will not be an archaeological event. It will be a spiritual one, because what lies beneath Machu Picchu may not simply reveal who built it, but why. As the mist thickens around the terraces and the mountain hums with evening wind, you can almost feel it, the slow heartbeat beneath your feet, ancient and patient, the pulse of memory, the breathing of the builders, still there, still waiting, and soon they will no longer be waiting alone. The legacy of the builders. The mountain has spoken, not through words, but through endurance. Its message has echoed through stone, blood, and silence. Now, at last, we begin to understand. For the builders before time did not leave behind monuments for worship. They left lessons for remembrance. Their cities, their geometry, their alignments, all of it was a philosophy made solid, a worldview carved into granite, meant not to impress, but to awaken. What, then, was their message? Perhaps it is hidden not in the stones themselves, but in the principles that shaped them. Every wall, every terrace, every sacred site whispers the same law, the law of harmony. To build was to attune, to shape was to listen, to live was to balance. In their world, there was no separation between spirit and science, between matter and consciousness. Stone was alive, light was intelligent, sound was sacred. The builders understood that reality itself was a symphony, and that civilization thrived only when humanity played in tune with it. They did not seek to conquer nature. They sought to collaborate with it. The Incas inherited that wisdom, though only fragments remained. They called it Aini, sacred reciprocity, the eternal exchange between giver and receiver. To plant was to thank the soil. To harvest was to honor the sky. Every action had its echo, every word its vibration. They believed the earth, Pachamama, was not a resource, but a relative, and in serving her, they served themselves. That was the legacy of the builders. Not technology, but understanding. Not domination, but resonance. In that worldview, the temple was not a house for the gods. It was a mirror for the soul. The mountain was not a monument. It was a teacher. To climb it was to climb oneself. To align with the stars was to align with destiny. Their architecture was a form of meditation, a conversation with the universe conducted in stone. And perhaps that is why their monuments still stand. They were built on a foundation deeper than engineering, the foundation of intention. Every block, every angle, every alignment was placed with reverence. To them, construction was prayer, the physical manifestation of harmony between heaven and earth. Their legacy is not endurance of stone, but endurance of purpose. What if our own world remembered that truth? Imagine cities designed not for profit, but for balance. Energy drawn not by force, but by resonance. Technology that heals rather than consumes. Perhaps that is what the builders foresaw, that one day we would rise again with the same power they once held. The difference would be how we used it, because the fall of their world was not caused by ignorance, but by imbalance. They understood the laws of nature so deeply that they could alter reality itself. But somewhere along the line, they forgot to honor it. Knowledge became pride, and pride invited correction. The great cataclysm was not punishment, it was consequence. The universe, seeking harmony, reset the song. And now, as we stand on the edge of another age, a time of climate shifts, technological upheaval, and spiritual hunger, the stones of the Andes hum the same warning. not of doom, but of remembrance. They ask us, can you build again without forgetting balance? The shamans of the Sacred Valley say that Machu Picchu was never meant to be found by force. It revealed itself when humanity was ready to hear its voice again. Perhaps every rediscovery in archaeology is not an act of uncovering the past, but of the past uncovering us, choosing the moment to speak. And what does it say? It says that everything alive, from the atom to the galaxy, vibrates with purpose. It says that consciousness is not an accident of biology, but the field from which matter itself arises. It says that we, too, are builders, every thought a brick, every action a foundation in the architecture of existence. To remember the builders is to remember ourselves. Their legacy endures not only in Machu Picchu's terraces or Tiwanaku's gates, but in the simple rhythm of human life. Breath, heartbeat, movement, rest. Each a cycle, each a harmony, each a microcosm of the cosmic architecture they once mirrored in stone. And maybe that is why the Incas called the human being Ailu Runa, the community of souls. They believed that we are all extensions of one living body, the earth, and that what we do to her, we do to ourselves. This was not superstition. It was wisdom so advanced that modern science is only beginning to rediscover it. Quantum physics tells us that the observer and the observed are inseparable, that reality responds to consciousness. To the builders, that was not theory, it was daily life. When they built a temple, they built a thought. When they carved a stone, they carved intention into the universe. The temple still stands because the intention still vibrates. Perhaps that is why you feel something indescribable when standing among those walls, a vibration, a familiarity, as if some part of you remembers how to listen, because you do, because we all do. The builders were not gods. They were what we once were, and what we may become again. Their legacy, then, is not an inheritance but an invitation to rebuild the bridge between knowledge and wisdom, to remember that progress without purpose is regression in disguise, and to realize that the greatest temple we will ever construct is not made of stone, but of consciousness. The mountain still hums the same song, and those who stop long enough to hear it can feel that the vibration matches something deep inside, the pulse of creation itself. Because the builders before time did not vanish. They became the song, and the song still plays. And as humanity begins to awaken once more, the melody grows louder, calling us to remember the map of heaven that they left behind, etched not in paper, but in the stars. The forgotten map of heaven night falls over the Andes, and the mountains become silhouettes of constellations. The stars seem close enough to touch, as if the sky itself has bent downward to meet the earth. In that moment, you begin to understand what the ancients knew, that heaven was never above. It was always here, reflected in stone. For centuries, archaeologists have mapped the sacred sites of the Inca world: Machu Picchu, Cusco, Sacsayhuamán, Ollantaytambo, Pisac, Tiwanaku, and others. But when their coordinates are plotted together, something extraordinary emerges, a celestial pattern. The distances, angles, and orientations between them mirror the stars that dominate the Andean night, the constellations of the Southern Cross, Orion, and the Pleiades. The Sacred Valley itself forms a terrestrial projection of the Milky Way, the Mayu, the River of Heaven. It is as if the builders carved the cosmos into the earth, creating a map that unites time, space, and soul, a forgotten map of heaven. In Quechua cosmology, the sky was not a separate realm. It was the upper body of the same living being whose heart beat in the mountains. The Milky Way was its spine, the stars were its organs, and the rivers, the reflection of its divine veins. The Incas called this unity Hanak Pacha, the world above, inseparable from Ke Pacha, the world of the living. Every mountain, or Apu, corresponded to a star. Every city mirrored a constellation. Each human life was a microcosm of that greater architecture. This was not myth. It was science of the sacred. Their astronomer priests, the Amautas, mapped the heavens with precision. They observed that the stars moved not as isolated lights, but as parts of a breathing organism. And so, they built their cities to resonate with that same celestial rhythm, to bring heaven to earth. Cusco, the capital of the Inca Empire, was designed in the shape of a puma, the guardian of the earthly realm. Its head pointed toward Sacsayhuamán, whose zigzagging walls symbolized lightning, energy, and transformation. Machu Picchu lay aligned with the heart of Orion and the Pleiades, the celestial portal of rebirth. Ollantaytambo, to the north, reflected the star cluster of the Seven Sisters, the womb of creation. Tiwanaku, far south, corresponded to the gate of the sun, the cosmic doorway of consciousness. Together, they formed a terrestrial mirror of the heavens, a network of resonance linking the Earth's magnetic lines with the geometry of the stars. To modern eyes, these correspondences seem poetic coincidence, but geometry does not lie. The angles between these sites align within fractions of a degree to the star paths they emulate. Even the distances follow cosmic ratios, the same proportions found in planetary orbits and the harmonic relationships of sound. The builders before time were not simply architects. They were cosmographers, map makers of reality itself. Perhaps that is why they built where they did, because each site was not chosen for convenience, but for frequency. Each mountain, each valley, vibrated with a unique tone within the Earth's magnetic field. By aligning their temples to the stars, they tuned the planet to the cosmos, a planetary symphony designed to keep the balance between above and below. Some researchers now call this the Earth-Sky Network, a global web of sacred sites that mirror constellations on every continent. In Egypt, the pyramids of Giza align with Orion's belt. In Cambodia, Angkor Wat traces the Draco constellation. In Mexico, Teotihuacan follows the Pleiades. And in the Andes, the Sacred Valley reflects the Milky Way itself. Different builders, same pattern, as if guided by a shared memory, a universal language written in geometry. Could it be that the builders before time were part of a single world civilization, one that understood the planet as an instrument in a cosmic orchestra, that they built their monuments as tuning points, harmonizing the resonance of earth and sky to sustain equilibrium? If so, then Machu Picchu was not merely a city, it was a chord, one note in the song of the earth. Even today, the Andean shamans, the Pacos, continue this ancient science through ceremony. They speak of Tinki, the meeting point between opposites, sky and soil, light and shadow, spirit and body. To them, the sacred sites are still alive, still connected through energy lines that pulse like veins through the mountains. When they perform rituals at these places, they say they are reopening the channels between earth and heaven, keeping the old network alive. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps every time we stand in awe before Machu Picchu, something reawakens. Our heartbeat synchronizes with the pulse of the mountain. Our breath matches the rhythm of the wind. For a brief moment, we are no longer observers of the sacred. We are participants in it. That, too, is part of the builder's legacy, to remind us that we are not apart from the cosmos, but expressions of it. Look again at the terraces of Machu Picchu. Seen from above, they curve like ripples in water, like the arms of a spiral galaxy. The temples align with the sun's path, and the stones glow at dawn as if remembering their origin among the stars. Every sunrise there feels less like a beginning and more like a return, as though the sky recognizes itself in the mountain, heaven and earth exchanging light. Maybe that was the true purpose of these sites, to act as bridges between the finite and the infinite, between memory and destiny. The forgotten map of heaven is not a chart to navigate the sky. It is a reminder of what we are made of, starlight and stone, vibration and thought. And perhaps one day, when the stars align as they once did, the map will awaken again. The gates will hum, the terraces will vibrate, and humanity will remember not just where it came from, but what it was meant to become. Because the builders did not build to be remembered. They built so we could remember ourselves as reflections of the cosmos, architects of consciousness and keepers of the eternal balance. And as the constellations slowly shift above the Andes, the song of the earth rises again, faint but certain, calling us toward the final revelation, the moment when the mountain itself will speak. When the mountain speaks, there are moments in human history when the world itself seems to breathe, when the earth exhales truth through silence. High in the Andes, where clouds cradle the peaks like ancient memories, one such breath is waiting. The mountain does not speak often, but when it does, its voice is eternity. For centuries, Machu Picchu has stood in stillness, watching empires rise and fall, watching the stars shift across epochs. It has endured storms, earthquakes, and the weight of human disbelief, yet it remains untouched, not by chance, but by purpose. Because it was never merely a city, it was a listener, a bridge between worlds, between what was, what is, and what will be. When dawn breaks over the terraces, the first light touches the Intihuatana stone, and for a fleeting instant, shadow vanishes. Sun and earth are in perfect balance. In that moment, if you stand still enough, if you breathe in rhythm with the mountain, you can feel it, a pulse, deep and resonant, echoing through the ground like the heartbeat of time itself. It is not imagination, it is memory. The builders before time understood that memory was not something the mind carried, it was something the world carried. They built monuments as tuning forks for remembrance. And Machu Picchu is their final chord, the note that never fades. We came searching for history, and we found reflection. For what we have called lost civilization may not be lost at all. It may be us, the same consciousness, reborn and wandering, trying again to understand its own song. Every generation looks at these stones and feels the same unspoken question rise: who built this? But the mountain's answer is softer, older, infinite. You did. Perhaps that is what it means when the mountain speaks. It does not whisper secrets of the past, but truths of the present. It reminds us that the same intelligence that shaped these stones flows through our veins, that the same harmony that aligned the stars runs through our thoughts. The builders were not gods. They were humans who remembered they were divine. And maybe the real mystery is not how they built Machu Picchu, but how we forgot how to listen. Modern civilization has conquered distance, but not silence. We have mapped the stars, but not the soul. We have built towers taller than the mountains, yet none that speak. And still, the Andes wait, patient, ancient, humming with the same tone as the earth's heart, waiting for us to remember the first language, resonance. It is said that when Viracocha finished his work, he turned to his disciples and said, "All that I have made is alive, and when the world forgets, the mountains will remember." And so they do. The Incas called Machu Picchu Viracocha, the house of the Creator. To walk its paths was to walk the spine of the world, to move through a living temple designed not for worship, but for awakening. Every staircase was a lesson, every wall a mirror, every shadow a teacher. Even the wind carried scripture, invisible but eternal. And when you finally reach the summit, when the sun rises and the clouds dissolve, you realize something profound. You are not looking at a ruin. You are looking at a reminder, a reflection of what humanity is capable of when it builds with balance, when it sings in harmony with creation. We have searched for Atlantis beneath the sea, for Eden in deserts, for gods in the sky. But maybe the true lost world has always been within us, buried beneath layers of fear, pride, and forgetfulness. Maybe the flood that destroyed the builders was not just of water, but of amnesia. And maybe now, as we stand once more at the edge of catastrophe, the earth is giving us one final chance to remember, because the builders before time left a map, not of heaven above, but of heaven within. And every sacred site, every myth, every vibration leads to the same destination, the awakened human heart. The shamans say that when the mountain finally speaks, it will not be with thunder or fire. It will speak through the hearts of those who remember the song. It will awaken not as an event, but as an understanding that we are the continuation of the builder's dream, that civilization is not measured by what we construct, but by what we honor. Maybe that is why Machu Picchu still calls to millions across the world, not as a tourist attraction, but as a pilgrimage of remembrance. Each visitor brings a fragment of the old vibration back into motion. Each gaze upon the terraces rekindles the geometry of gratitude. Each breath in the mountain's thin air whispers the same truth. You are made of the same light that shaped these stones. The builders before time may have walked this earth in flesh and blood, or perhaps they were something even greater, humanity in its state of harmony, a memory of what we can be when we remember we are one with the cosmos. When the mountain speaks, it is not to tell us of lost empires. It is to remind us that empires always fall, but harmony endures. That knowledge fades, but wisdom echoes. That we are not here to conquer the earth, but to complete it, to play our part in its symphony. And so, as the wind passes through the ruins and the sun sinks once more into the sacred valley, the final words of the builders seem to rise from the stones themselves. Do not look for us in the past. Look for us in the balance. Because the true Machu Picchu is not built on the mountain. It is built in the heart, and its terraces stretch not across the Andes, but across time, a stairway leading back to remembrance. The mountain has waited long enough. It does not ask for worship, nor for answers. It asks only for one thing, to be heard. And if you listen, truly listen, in the quiet between breaths, in the echo between heartbeats, you will hear it too. The whisper that began before time, the hum of stone, the song of light, the voice of creation itself, the voice of the mountain,